Is it on? I'd like to call to order the January 6th, 2020 New Canaan Board of Education meeting. First up is to approve the minutes from the December 16th meeting. Do I have a motion? Julie, second. Bob? All in favor? Okay. Next is to review and approve the agenda. Do I have a motion? Brendan, second. Carl? All in favor? Okay, comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. Is there anyone wishing to address the board? Okay. Just please state your name. Come up to the mic, thanks.
Hi, I'm Ben Skrulinas. I'm an 8th grader at Sachs Middle School, and I just wanted to state my thoughts on the let teens sleep thing. I've been doing the 7:30, the get to school at 7:30 routine for the last 2 years, 7th and 8th grade, and if you were to ask any teen at 7:30 in the morning when everybody's sitting down for class and everybody's extremely tired, they're obviously going to say, yes, I'd love to go to school later. I'd love to sleep in. But at the end of the day, when everybody's doing their sports that they love, they do it every day of the week. They do it 2 hours a day. They're going to want to take the time after school to do their sports, get home, do their homework, and get in bed at a reasonable time over sleeping in. Because if you were to move school later, then everybody would get out later, sports would start later, and it would become a butterfly effect where teens are going to sleep even later than they already are. And it would not be as helpful as it seems like it would be. I am all for sleeping in. I love it. I love a delayed start, and I'm never going to complain about that. But it's much nicer to be able to get to school, sit down at first period, and just work my way through the day. Because then at the end of the day, I know that I'm able to go to all the great clubs, STEM club with Miss Birdsall, cross country team, and I'm excited for all that in high school. And as long as I'm able to have that time after school to be able to compete, work on projects and everything else, I really would rather sacrifice my time in the morning. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, moving on. Reports and recognition. Well, tonight we have the superintendent's budget presentation with Dr. Lutzy.
Good evening. First, let me start by saying Happy New Year to members of the board. It's great to see everybody here tonight and to swap stories about our sons and daughters coming home for the holidays from college. And as we said, I think many of us are getting ready for them to go back in the next couple of days. So tonight, it is my great pleasure to present to you the superintendent's proposed budget for next year. So this is FY21. It's the 2021 school year. The excellence of the New Canaan Public Schools exists throughout the system, and the Board of Education is one strong exemplar of that excellence. Each of you bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to the governance of our school district, and your efforts contribute to the excellence of the system. And they have a direct impact on the quality of the educational experience for all of our students. So tonight, I'm honored to present to you the superintendent's proposed budget for 2020-2021. Education is an incredibly complex endeavor, and our success is made possible by the many outstanding professionals associated with the New Canaan Public Schools. Our district is quite fortunate to have passionate and dedicated teachers, administrators, and staff, many of whom had a hand in developing the budget that's before you tonight. I'd especially like to thank a few individuals for their outstanding work in putting this budget together. First of all, Dr. Joanne Keating, Director of Finance and Operations, contributed countless hours considerable expertise throughout the budget process. Assisting Joanne has been Tracy Haberman, whose work as budget director brought great clarity, accuracy, and understanding to this year's budget development process. And I could add pagination to the list as well. Thank you. I want to express a very special thank you to Dr. Keating and to Tracy for their truly outstanding work in putting this year's budget document together. As you'll see this evening and over the course of the entire budget process, New Canaan's extraordinarily fortunate to have such dedicated, talented, and knowledgeable professionals working on behalf of our students and the district. Building a budget is a team endeavor, so I also want to thank Dr. Carenti, Mr. Tesber, Ms. Pianca for their dedication, expertise, and insight. As far as district leadership teams go, I feel blessed to know that we have the very best, and I'm honored and humbled to work alongside each of them every day. Our budget begins from the ground up, and I also want to share my gratitude with our outstanding administrators and our program leaders. Our principals, Bill Egan, Dave Gussich, Jan Murphy, Chris Wolick, John Grosso, our district administrators, Alan Sneath, Lizette D'Amico, Matt Salvestrini, our program managers, Jay Egan, Roy Walder, Dan Clark, Michelle Santilli, and Ian McHugh. As we'll discuss tonight, school districts are complex, dynamic organizations doing the most important work on the planet. And I'm confident in saying that our team here in New Canaan is the very best. I'm extremely proud, as you can tell, of the great work that we do together every day. And this year's budget proposal is yet another example of the excellence and efficiency that we accomplish together here in New Canaan. We begin just by taking a look at our budget calendar for our budget process. As you know, tonight is our formal initiation into the process, but the process itself began months ago internally, back in October, November, as we began having our meetings with the program leaders who were meeting with their staff, with the teachers, TAs, and others, to develop proposals and needs to bring forward in the process. That's when I talk about it being built from the ground up. We don't just take a budget and roll it forward. We build the budget each year based on the needs and drivers that we have in that budget. So that work, as you know, culminated into our budget workshop back in December on the 9th, where we spent several hours together going through the initiatives, the ideas, the thinking, and planning with our administrators and our program leaders. So tonight, I'm proud to present the superintendent's budget proposal for 2021 to you. After tonight, there are several opportunities for feedback and consideration for the community and for the board. As you're aware, tomorrow morning, 9:30 in the morning, I'll be sharing the budget with the elementary PTCs at a joint PTC meeting over in the East Galley. On Monday, the 13th, we have scheduled a public hearing for the Board of Education in order to give the public the opportunity to come and share their feedback, both on the budget and or on the school start time initiative that you'll see embedded in the budget as we talk through it tonight. We have a Board of Education workshop that is then scheduled on the 16th, which comes the day after the meeting with the PTC of Saks and the PFA at the high school, where parents there are encouraged to attend and to learn and to provide their feedback. The Board of Education's workshop and review will be to look at the budget in its totality prior to a second reading on January 21st. So these 7 budget meetings for the Board of Education are all in place to help to solicit feedback, to give the board an opportunity to ask us questions, and to provide that open dialogue and forum as we move throughout. But certainly it's not done there, because after the Board of Education votes to adopt the budget on the 21st, it then becomes the Board of Education's budget, and we move through the remainder of the process with the town funding bodies. We have 2 meetings with the Board of Selectmen on the morning of the 23rd, and then a meeting on the 28th where they will be voting on the budget. And as you may recall, the Board of Selectmen really focus on our capital requests. And so we'll spend quite a bit of time with them over those couple of days in dialogue about the capital requests and their feedback therein. Afterwards, we'll go on February 11th to the Board of Finance, where we are scheduled to present the Board of Education's budget to the entire Board of Finance. And then subsequent meetings will be held for conversation, dialogue, and follow-up, culminating into a public hearing by the Board of Finance on March 3rd, and then a formal vote by that board on March 5th. At that point, we'll go to the Town Council, And on March 18th, we'll again present the Board of Education's budget to the Town Council. And then those follow-up meetings for dialogue and discussion will occur on March 26th. March 31st will be the public hearing with the Town Council. And ultimately, all of the process culminates on April 2nd, which is when the Town Council will be voting on the budget. And I much prefer the date of April 2nd over April 1st, which it was a few years ago. But as you can see, with 17 budget meetings formally and many more informally as we go through, we have an inclusive process that provides numerous feedback opportunities for all stakeholders. And as a result, our budget is carefully considered and thoroughly vetted prior to that approval as it moves through. So part of this budget, the process itself has been adjusted based on feedback from the board, and I certainly hope that it's met your expectations and planning, and look forward to the dialogue that we'll have in the weeks and months ahead. As we consider our budget, it's important to begin discussions with a review of our goals. When we develop curriculum in the district, as you know, we use an understanding by design format, which really says the best way to succeed is to begin with the end in mind. So as we begin into our look and get our budget, I think it makes sense to begin with the end in mind. And the goals help to articulate the direction and the ends that we have in mind. As you know, Goal 1 is focused on teaching and learning and educational excellence. Goal number 2 is on communication. Goal number 3 is on exemplary instructional practice. Goal number 4 is focused on school, climate, and safety. And Goal 5 is focused on stewardship of our resources. Our goals themselves are consistent and stable, which means that they result in aligned and consistent action. And we've seen consistently strong outcomes as a result of these efforts. Our sustained focus on and commitment to the district goals has provided a consistent roadmap for our success, and they serve as our guide throughout the budget development process. Thanks to your leadership and the leadership of our staff throughout the district, we take a thoughtful approach to all that we do, which empowers us to keep our actions aligned with our students' best interests. We focus on teaching our students the knowledge and skills they need to be successful in any context. And we do so by developing, implementing, and assessing a relevant and rigorous curriculum with excellent educational professionals and engaged parents in a system that honors continuous learning and systemic growth. With that in mind, we focus on balancing the excellence of our school system with the efficiency of a well-run professional organization. Several assumptions and understandings undergird our approach. We recognize the importance of continuing to meet our obligations, the community's high expectations of sustained excellence and continuous improvement, and our standards of excellence for all of our students. But simultaneously, we recognize the need to continue meeting the community's calls for low overall budgetary increases. We are uncompromising in our commitment to excellence and unrelenting in our pursuit of efficiency. And both are the hallmarks of our world-class educational system. The excellence in the New Canaan Public Schools is apparent in all that we do. The excellence in our athletics program shows year after year. Of particular note is our basketball championship, which for the first time since 1962, our boys basketball program won the state championship here in New Canaan last year. We also had a three-peat in girls golf last year for state championship. We're swimming and diving state championships. And as you can see on the list, impressive individual performances by many student athletes across the board. This is all accomplished with a 70% student participation rate. It is truly a tradition of excellence in our athletics program where we are competitive across the board and we do so with class. And as you can see, we're recognized as the most outstanding small school athletic program. As Jay Egan has shared with us in the past, it's important to note that New Canaan High School is one of the smallest, if not the smallest, high schools in the FCAC. And yet we continue to perform and compete at the very highest levels. The excellence also is apparent in the arts. Again, of particular note, in art, we had 24 regional awards in the arts. 16 of our students were invited to participate in the CMEA Western Region Music Ensembles, spanning chorus, orchestra, and band. We were awarded 4 statewide Halo Awards in theater this past year, which is very competitive. It's adjudicated award where people do come, they watch the performance, and then it usually culminates in an activity, typically in the theater in Waterbury. Significant awards. Our programs continue to expand while they simultaneously improve. And they are another hallmark of the excellence of the New Canaan Public Schools. We also provide excellent opportunities for our students. We recognize the value and importance of providing opportunities for students to connect with our school organization outside of the classroom. Many of them participate in athletics. Many of them participate in the arts. Many of them also participate in our co-curricular activities. This is a long list. It could be longer. The font would be even smaller, but I think the point is that we are responsive to student interest and student needs by creating programs based on students' ideas and thoughts. Years ago, when I was the principal here at the high school, we had a Quidditch club, and the students would meet after school down in the cafeteria and play their version of Quidditch. It's up to the students. We're here for them, and we're responsive to their interests because we do know the research that shows that when students are connected to their schools in various ways, they do better while here and they do better after they leave. This excellence is also apparent in the academics and in our classroom performance with our students. As you know, and I won't belabor the point, Dr. Carenti shared with her presentation with us a few months back. In looking across our demographic reference group, we use the term DERG often, our Smarter Balanced assessments, which are taken by students in grades 3 through 8 each year in the spring. Once again, we performed at the top of our DERG and the top of the state in both English language arts and in mathematics. That's the aggregate of grades 3 through 8 in language arts and in math. But when you drill down into it just a little bit further, you see similarly high performance consistently across the grades. As a matter of fact, here is our English language arts performance, and you'll see that of the 6 grades that are represented, 5 of those grades we are first in our DERG, and in 1 of them we are second. That performance is outstanding. It's also consistent, thanks to the great work that happens in our schools every day. In mathematics, similar results. Of the 6 grades represented here, 5 are at the top, and the 7th grade is third in the DERG. Recognizing that being at the top of DERG A in these sort of ranking and comparisons generally places you at or very near the top in the state, and that certainly is the case in all of these. But we do know that the quickest path to mediocrity is to rest on past successes. So we are committed to continuously working on getting better and better and better. You know, we use the term continuous improvement, and it can be a buzzword in many places, but for us it truly does embody the spirit with which we approach our work. We do believe that the work we do in our classrooms is the most important work on the planet, and we've committed ourselves and our lives to helping each and every one of our students to actualize and realize the amazing potential that they have. The district itself, through our efforts in the classroom with our teachers and the continuous improvement path that they are on, our work supporting that classroom work in our curriculum design, our assessment work, all of it is continuously being looked at, reviewed, adjusted, and improved in order to continue delivering the very best on behalf of our kids. The excellence in the elementary middle grades continues up into the high school. We look at our school day SAT results and our comparison across our DERG. In the English language arts, we're at the top of the DERG and at the top of the state. And in mathematics, second in our DERG behind Darien, who consistently scores very, very high in math, and we're still trying to figure that out. But very proud of our results here. The high school, as you can imagine, provides many data points. And we developed this chart of data points years ago and continue to use it as a way to sort of review the program and to reflect on how we're doing and where we are. As you would expect, the graduation rate is incredibly high, and it speaks to our programming and to our support of each individual student. Our 4-year college attendance rate speaks to our preparation of students and the counseling services that help them to get started after high school. There was some conversation, I recall, at a board meeting in the past where we had shifted the question to be about whether or not students were satisfied with the college application process. And the board expressed really an interest in going back to the question around accepted in the 3 top colleges. So we've shifted back, we collected that data, put that data back in for your consideration in the process. The attending most competitive colleges, at 30%. The quick story, years ago, Jonathan Costa was doing some work with the Board of Ed, and some of you may recall, he came and did some work around schools for the 21st century, and we were talking about the district, and I was helping him to understand who we are and what the needs for New Canaan were. And I showed him these data, and we worked through it. And he asked me what we meant by that, most competitive colleges. And I explained to him that I mean they're the most competitive colleges. He said, yeah, but most districts are 3 to 5% around those schools. How could you be at 30%? This must be a wider group. And certainly I circled back to our counselors to be sure it's not a wider group. These are our students do receive bids from many of them do receive bids from the most competitive colleges. And it's something that we continue to look at and continue to see if there are other ways that we can improve that process for students and for families. Years ago, the board did some research and moved some resources into our school counseling department by adding a couple of counselors and by providing some resources for the travel for our counselors. And I do believe that the travel that our counselors have done has yielded benefits for our kids. What they do generally is they'll look and see, at the end of the year, they'll spend some time in the summer reviewing the college applications, and they'll look to see are there any schools that students, they expected students to be able to get into that they didn't get into. And then they'll look and see, are there places that they haven't visited in a while? And if so, they'll go out and they'll meet with the admissions counselor and others in order to make sure that relationship is strong between New Canaan and that school. It's an ongoing process that our counselors engage in. And in the next cycle, I imagine that some counselors will come before the board to share with you sort of what those efforts have been. Anyway, back to our performance here. You'll see consistently high numbers that are moving in the right direction for the most part. We've continued to expand our program for our advanced placement courses. Some of that, the 26 to 27, is really driven by student enrollment into an AP art course that has been offered, but if somebody doesn't enroll in it, we don't run it. So that's the jump up to 27, I believe. When you see the AP participation as a number is really driven by enrollment overall. So we've had a smaller class in total, but I would imagine the percentage of students is equally high, and take a look through. So our high school continues to do quite well on various measures of performance. As a result of all of these efforts, it's athletics, it's the arts, it's our co-curricular activities, it's the academics, our school district is recognized both regionally, statewide, and nationally as a school of excellence. Niche updates their rankings every year. This year, and sometimes our elementary schools might jump one over the other, but they all stay in the top 5. Our middle school is named the #1 middle school in the state this year by niche.com, and our high school the 2nd best high school in the state. These are only some of the external rankings. When people take a look at our school district, I could have spent hours and hours and put slides and slides together. I think you get the point. We deliver an outstanding educational experience for every one of our children, and we're recognized for doing that really wonderful work. I mentioned in the beginning that we are unwavering in our commitment to excellence and unrelenting in our pursuit of efficiency. So I just want to take a little bit of time to share with you some information around the cost of our operations and ways that we work to contain those. We'll start with our per pupil spending comparisons. Now, New Canaan, this is on the other lists and charts, we're at or near the top, and very proud of that. We're not at or near the top of this one, and we're very proud of that. This is ranked by the net current expenditures per pupil, which we would call your per pupil spending. The per pupil spending is calculated by looking at the costs that are reported in the state report at the end of each year, and then they divide it out by APM, which is their ADM, average daily membership, which we'll talk about a little bit, which is like your attendance, essentially. The New Canaan Public Schools, as a district, we rank 27th in the state for our per pupil expenditure, and you can see the rest of the DIRG is included there and sort of where they break out. ANGLIC is a little different. ANGLIC is your wealth measure. That is your adjusted, equalized net grand list per capita. So when the state looks on, say, construction reimbursements, they use the ANGLIC measure to determine what percentage of reimbursement that you may be eligible for as a district for construction projects. The New Canaan consistently is ranked number 2 in the state in this measure, this ANGLIC measure. But, and so that, in conjunction with our 27th in the state for our net current expenditures per pupil, I think is reflective of a well-run, highly efficient operation that we have here. For example, just for fun, if our per pupil here in New Canaan were equal to the highest in our DIRG, our budget would be over $10 million higher today than it is. If we were equal to the highest in the state, it would be over $60 million more than it is right now. And because I know you're wondering, if it were equal to Darien-Ann's, it'd be about $1.3 million higher. So I think that there are lots of pieces that go into this, but it's something that we should be proud of. And it does speak, I think, to the efficiency of our operations, which we work very hard to manage and control. Some of the ways that we do that, we've been insourcing select functions that has led to both contained costs and improved service delivery. We've done that in our printing. And not only has it's lowered our cost, it's also reduced our paper consumption by installing software called Follow Me Print and doing some other things. We've talked about that in the past. Our maintenance, instead of having generalists as our maintenance crew, we now have specialists. We have a plumber, we have electricians, we have HVAC, we have others that can really get into the systems, they understand how they work, and they can do that level 1 diagnosis. Not only does that help us in the speed and responsiveness to fix things if they do go down, it lowers our costs because the folks are right here in district, but it also fosters pride and ownership in that work. They know that as they're doing this work, they want to make sure they do it carefully, because if they don't, they're back tomorrow doing the same thing. Often with companies, they're in a rush to try to get to the next job, and to maximize the quantity of work that they do. But when we do it here in-house, it really does foster that ownership. And you see it in our crew. You see it in the folks that are doing this work for us across our buildings. We've also insourced some skilled functions in special education in particular, our OTPT, BCBA, and others. Again, it can reduce costs, because instead of having to hire services to have people come in to deliver these needed services to our kids, we have folks in-house who can do it. It also helps to establish those relationships with our kids, with our families, because these students often need service over a long period of time. So by having folks in-house to deliver these services, those relationships are much stronger. And I would argue that the programming is more precise and specific and targeted to the needs of each child. We have a long-standing tradition of insourcing our special education transportation. That has served to lower our costs. Those are the white vans that we'll talk about a little bit when we get to capital. It lowers our costs. When I look and talk with my peers in other districts that don't have this, they are looking for ways to contain and control the costs. We always look at ways to do it, but they're all many of them wish they had an in-house transportation system to try to bring down the costs. If you don't, you're outsourcing that, and the costs are extraordinary. It again enables those long-term relationships between families in our district through our drivers, through the folks that are in those vans, working with children, doing that. It improves the customer service. It provides an experience for our children that, again, is done in the way that we would want it to be done here in New Canaan. So all of these are cost-saving opportunities. These are ways that we have reduced our expenditures and yet improved our service delivery. And that's why, that's select functions. It doesn't work everywhere, but where it does, we find ways to make it happen. Similarly, we've been implementing environmentally friendly cost-saving opportunities across the district for the last couple of years. As you know, we've moved over to natural gas at 4 of our 5 buildings. And we just met a few weeks ago with Eversource and the First Selectman and others to talk about the possibility of running the natural gas out to West School. Propane Years ago, when we negotiated our bus contract, we negotiated in a 3-year phase-in to 100% of our bus fleet running on propane. So now we're doing that and recognizing the savings on that. And the advantages, again, of burning cleaner without the exhaust, burning quietly, and always starting regardless of temperature. Works out very well. Solar, now we've, last Board of Ed meeting, Joanne shared with us a presentation on the South Solar and the good work that's been done there. Now we're looking at doing work at East, West, and Saks during this upcoming year, which will, again, save us money and is better for the environment. And there's planning underway for the high school as well. Cogeneration is something that we've been looking at and we're considering. There's planning underway for Saks and the high school. It would supplement solar to provide a lower cost electricity by burning natural gas, and essentially you become your own little generator of power that then is fed in. There's lots of benefits to that. There is certainly an upfront cost to it. So in our capital plan, you'll see a little bit more about that. I'm glad to talk more about it. Little things like LED lighting across the district. This past year, we replaced the lights across the elementary schools, and that's significantly reduced our power demand. We're looking to do the same at the high school and over at Saks. Because we are almost 1 million square feet, when we do something like that, we take it to scale, and it results in noticeable improvements and cost savings. And the load balancing that we've talked about. Our electrical rate is based on our peak demand over the course of a running 12 months. So by integrating some technology into our system, we're able to balance the load so we don't get a spike if there's a power outage or something else in a building. When everything comes back online, it doesn't all come back at the same time, so you don't get this big spike that then penalizes you for the next 12 months. The load balancing helps to bring things online sequentially, helps to monitor this so that you smooth that out, you don't have the spike, and it manages your costs and contains them in electrical. Again, there's a small upfront cost to put in something like that in place, but it really is forward thinking by the facilities department and others to consider what the long-term outcome of something like that would be. All of those it's better for the environment, it's better for our budget, win-win all around. So the budget proposal that we're discussing tonight contains several primary themes related to both budget drivers and program improvements. I was trying to think about how do I sort of sum up before we go into the actual numbers, because I like to build the suspense as much as I can. But truly, this budget before you that we'll be discussing, it does balance the community's expectations and well-placed expectations of excellence in our school system with our long-term focus on efficiency to provide that world-class educational experience for all students at reasonable cost. We're here to build a sustainable system that delivers excellence for our children, for our parents, for our community. It invests in the high-leverage continuous improvement initiatives, supports high-quality curricular instructional and assessment practices, aligns school schedules to optimize student learning. It provides for the district's ongoing safety and security efforts and responds to anticipated shifts in enrollment K-12. So in all of that, and in doing all of that, we get to the actual numbers themselves. And I know I put this slide in here every year, and I don't like it at all. But it is in your budget book if you want to take a look. But essentially, it just shows the yearly expended budgets from 2017, 2018, 2019, and then the 2020 budget and the 2020 projected. Now, why I like to keep this budget in is to make the point that boards of education and towns in general are often, feedback is often shared with them that people say you're budgeting to a budget, right? You're building your budget off of a budget. And that, for us, that's not the case. I mean, it is to a degree, but what we do is spend an inordinate amount of time, really, not inordinate, but an extraordinary amount of time developing what we call the projection. And this, again, works through Joanne, through Tracy, and the finance department. And they go into each and every one of our line items in our budget and using their historical knowledge of our district and our budget and their own professional experience and judgment, they work to project out where they anticipate that budget line will end at the end of the year. Over the last couple of years, I will commend Joanne again. She's been extremely accurate in these projections. And what it helps us do is to take the budget that's approved in April the year before and to modify and adjust it based on the emerging needs of the school district as we go through and operate the district. So, for instance, if you look at the 2020 budget in salaries, the budget in salaries was for $59,779,891. As we've looked at the salaries in December, and we looked at what has been expended, we looked at things that are things that we can predict, salaries, contracted salaries and others, those are predictable for the most part. Of course, any leaves or unanticipated changes impact the number. We looked at trends in overtime use, trends in hourly employees and others, dove deeply into negotiations and who's where and what have you. But after significant work, the projection was made at $59,615,013. And that $13, that's just how precise we truly do get as we're doing this work. So the difference there is based on changes that have occurred or changes that we predict based on our knowledge and experience in managing the budget over the years. So the projected becomes sort of that step between budget and expended. Expended is, we know, right? At the end of the year and on September 1, the Board of Ed receives a report from the finance department and from the district of how we spent the budget in the year past. But we don't know exactly how we're going to spend 2020 because we're right in the middle of it. So this enables us to budget against projected where we anticipate being, and again, those projections have been accurate. And so as we go through the conversation and do this work, I encourage you to, certainly we can talk about compared to budget as much as you like, but I think the more accurate conversation is really around the projected number. You see the 2021 proposed budget in bold, and then the columns next to that, the number difference to projected and the percent different to projected. We'll get back to all of the numbers in a bit. But well, actually, before I move on, I'll just share. So budgets, school district budgets in Connecticut are comprised of these 8 large objects, which is why we use them as well. That's the salaries, employee benefits, contracted services, property services. Those large objects are defined for school districts in Connecticut, and that's what we ultimately roll up into. What we'll do tonight is sort of break each one down a little bit to understand kind of what are the changes and what's going into each of those budget objects, that you have before you. So another way to look at it would be to look at it by cost center. And so just this visual simply shows the balance between our cost centers. We call a cost center, a building is a cost center. A program can be a cost center, like our visual and performing arts program, our special education program, others. But essentially, that's another organizational method that we use to develop and understand our budget. The balance in the cost centers here you see across the 3 elementary schools. If West looks a little bit thinner, that's because its enrollment is a little bit smaller. We look to equalize on student as much as we can there. We look at the balance between Saks and the high school. The enrollments are very similar across the 2 buildings. And then you look at some of the other budget drivers. The largest single item in the budget is district-wide, which is where we have our insurance item. Because that is the aggregate from all of the buildings and all of our employees and all of our participants in that plan. But you see the balance across the cost centers. And in the budget book itself, there are a few pages that break it out by cost center as well. The largest simple item and the most important place to start, I believe, is with salary and benefits, because those are the largest budget drivers in our district, as it is in all districts. Salary and benefits comprise 81% of the total budget, and this request puts forward a budget of $74,880,242 with salary and benefits combined. The distribution is similar to suburban districts in the area and throughout the state. As educators, we believe wherever possible that our resources should go to support that core work. So it just makes sense that our resources would be first and foremost put towards our staffing. Education is a people business. Human capital is our primary asset. And the quality of the educational experience in the classroom is dependent on the work that occurs in the instructional core, which is the relationship between our teacher, our student, and the content. And our budget reflects this understanding. So research shows the single most influential factor in a student's growth in school is his or her teacher. and we distribute our resources with this in mind. So other areas include contracted services, property services, purchase services. I mentioned the other objects, but really the bulk of our budget, 81%, is in salary and benefits. So if we drill down into the salary expense, the majority of the staff are classroom teachers, then teaching assistants and other support staff. These three categories comprise 83% of our staff. And of course, they work daily with our children in the schools. Our custodians are managing and maintaining almost 1 million square feet of space in our buildings, and they're 5% of our staff overall. And then you see secretaries, non-represented staff, leadership, which includes administrators and program managers, and our food services are each 4% of our total staffing. And in the beginning of the budget book, there's a staffing breakdown and a staffing model as well that gets more specific. So what drives our staffing? How do we make decisions about how many teachers we have and where they are, what grade levels? It's all driven, as you know, by enrollment. First and foremost, it's our classroom teachers. The projections that Darlene shared with the board a few months back showed a stable enrollment projection over the next couple of years. You can see the 2019 number at 4172 back on October 1st of 2019. It anticipated to tick down 7 students district-wide next year. So I think we could call that pretty stable in a district of over 4,000 students. More importantly, though, is the distribution of students across the K-8 grades. And so, let's see. As we look, the top green bar is the elementary students. The orange is Saks, and the red is the high school. And you see there's a relationship between the elementary and the secondary as far as trend goes years out. So as our elementary schools are high, as those students move up through the grades into Saks, and then they move up into the high school, those numbers continue. The elementary will always trend a little bit higher because it's 5 grades, right, instead of the 4 at Saks into the high school. So if you don't look at total numbers, but you can look at direction and trend, and you see the relationship between the elementary, middle, and high school over time. The challenge with our enrollment projections, and I think there was a request for this at Darlene's presentation, so I thought I'd just put together a quick slide for you, is the predicting and projecting for our kindergarten students. So what the demographers do is they look at births 5 years out, and then they look at trend for kindergarten enrollment. And so we went back 10 years to take a look at that trend. So students that were born, for instance, in the beginning of this chart, if they were born in 2004, which is the blue line, the solid blue line, then what was the enrollment in 2009, 5 years later? And the data they use to determine the number of births is accurate in that they use the Connecticut data. They go look at the state, they look locally, and try to triangulate that as best they can. Of course, it's a moving target, right? It's hard sometimes to nail it down, but over time, those variables should be accounted for as we're looking for a ratio between the births and the enrollment. So back in 2004, there were a little over 200 births. 5 years later, in 2009, there are about 260 kindergarten enrollments. Right? So as you look over time, the demographers look to establish a ratio to this. Now, what you can see what happened this year in 2014 and 2019, and we've been talking quite a bit about the kindergarten enrollment and the surprise of the kindergarten enrollment. So in 2014, the births were a little below 150, which given our history would have projected out 5 years to be somewhere around the 250-ish number. However, our enrollment in kindergarten came in over 300. So those trends are very difficult to predict. And thought I'd put that in there just to share. We do our best. As I mentioned a few years ago, in this job you become an amateur everything. So this is my amateur demographer hat. I'll take that off. But I will talk briefly about enrollment trends across our DIRG, because I do think this is important as well. As a district, when we look across the DIRG, there are 7 districts in the DIRG, as you know, and Easton, Reading, and Region 9 are 3, which is why there's 9 here. Over the last 4 years, we've been relatively consistent. I mean, within 2% from 15, 16 to now. Not all of our neighbors have fared quite so well. You see some downward trend in some areas. Statewide, you may hear some talk about the suburbs and enrollment in the suburbs, sort of declining. There's some talk of that turning around. Certainly, they're seeing an explosion in some of the cities. So whether it's Danbury, Stanford, Norwalk, others, I know their enrollment is going through the roof. Bridgeport through the roof. But the suburbs are generally seem to be trending downward. For us here, again, we've been pretty stable. 7 students next year is our projection, to go down 7. So I think that if there is a trend out there, we may be bucking it a little bit as far as that enrollment trend goes. Okay. So I mentioned before, what's important to note about enrollment is the distribution of the kids, right? We can look at the total gross number and see what that is and see what the district kind of holding is. And going back to the kindergarten piece really quickly, that gap between the number of births and the 5-year later enrollment in kindergarten, that's really, what accounts for that is what they call in-migration, right? So what that means is the students above the line who enrolled in our system were not born here in New Canaan, but they migrated into New Canaan prior to enrolling in kindergarten. So it's a hard number to nail down, but it's important to note. It's something that we've had very strong in-district migration for many, many years. And I think that explains why last year when I was sharing the projections with the Board of Realtors, they were the only ones who looked at me and said, your kindergarten projection's wrong. Very confidently, they all, to a person, there were many of them in the room, said, you're much too low on kindergarten. It's going to be a lot higher than that because we've seen a lot of activity. And sure enough, they were right. So the numbers are important and interesting to look at, but really in order to operationalize this information and do something with it, we have to look at what the grade distribution is. So we look at our K-8 distribution first, because those really are directly connected to those class sizes. High school becomes more challenging because of the nature of a high school program, because of the way students move, the way scheduling works, et cetera. So what you see is there's fluctuations up and down at each of these grade levels, because as our history shows, we tend to have a larger class and then followed by a smaller class and back to a larger class. We have these up and down waves. Don't know why. So as we look at our projection for kindergarten, they're projecting it at 258, which is down 50 students. Now that projection is simply a mathematical calculation looking at that ratio from births to enrollment over the last 3 years. So we'll see how it does. Grade 1, that class is anticipated to go up to 69. So you can follow that through, and you see as these larger or smaller classes move through the grades, it can be a little bit disruptive for our school system because we budget and we plan and we staff to our enrollment. However, it's our responsibility to do that. So we work to do it consistently and well. As you can see, as we get into the middle school, our 7th grade is going down by 47 students, according to projections. And the middle school projections tend to be very accurate because those students are in the system. The kindergarten can be tough because they're not in the system yet, but once they're in, they tend to be retained as we go through. And, we have pretty solid numbers as far as out-migration and in-migration. So they're relatively reliable. So we look at, again, the distribution of the kids there. The largest grade in the district is that grade 11 at 367. So next year they move up to the senior year, 373. And it's these data that we base our staffing model after. Of course, there's another level of granularity at the K4 where we try to look across the buildings. And those projections are even more challenging. If you think kindergarten's hard, imagine doing kindergarten, not just how many, but where. So that's even more challenging. We do our best to, we budget to the projections, but we also look and evaluate, and that's where the enrollment variability adjustments come in, because if we've got a number that are breaking right on the class size guideline cutoff, history has shown that they may still come into the district, but they may not go into that one specific school. So we have some flexibility there, and the enrollment variability adjustment allows us that flexibility. And I'll talk about that right now. So under salaries, additions in the salary line in certified staffing, the net FTE increase in our elementary schools is a 1.2 FTE. Now, there's some calculations that occur to get to the 1.2 net, including, sort of, if we look just a straight enrollment review of our elementaries, we need an additional staff member at each building. But we're also taking 2 enrollment variability adjustments down because of those class size breaks and the way that it's being projected out. So the net is the 1.2. And that's where we appreciate the flexibility to make the determination of sort of, where the staff member is going to be needed based on what those numbers look like. And those are the meetings that we have all summer long, and we do that work, and we'll continue to report out to the board as we go. As a matter of fact, we're already starting with our kindergarten new student transition meetings. Is that your first one on the 15th? Yeah, or 16th? The 16th. So the first one is January 16th. And so we're starting already to build that class. I won't even try to figure out what the class is going to be. Was it the class of 2020, 2030, 2034? Whatever. All right. So we're also looking, based on the enrollment and the needs, we're looking at a 1.0 FTE in social studies up at the high school. Over the last couple of years, the high school has been ticking up in its overall size as a building. And at the same time, we've been looking at expanding the program. So what Principal Egan and Bob and others have shared with us is that their social studies offerings, which are very popular in the school, are really under a lot of pressure, where they're almost reaching a point where they're not going to be able to offer all of what they want to offer because they don't have enough sections to offer to the kids. So the pressure of the increased enrollment and the expanding program leads us to ask for that 1.0 FTE in social studies, again, to be determined based on the classes that the students sign up for. But really, in the last 5, 6 years, 7 years, we've added courses like AP macroeconomics, AP microeconomics. Our psychology has really taken off to be going from one class to 4 or 5 sections of the class. So it's a great story, and it comes with some resourcing needs in order to continue to meet the interest and demands of kids. There's a delta in hiring our new South School principal. We're looking to bring in a behavior analyst for our special education program, which would be a district-wide position. And we're going into negotiations with 3 non-certified employee unions. We're going with, that would be food service and our TAs and our secretaries. And so while we don't know what that increase is going to be, as we've done in the past, we have a salary adjustment line that we have some resources there for, based on our best thinking at the time. The board has asked us to break out costs of the changing school start times, right, in the budget. So you'll see 2 of these items have stars on them. One is the specials area 1.0 FTE, and that's to be determined based on need. And that's because of the alignment of the elementary schedules in this proposal. We are currently sharing staff across some of the elementary schools, and we would no longer be able to share staff in the same way. So we anticipate that there may be a need for additional staffing in the specials area to fill that gap. The other 2.0 is for van drivers. That's our special education in-district transportation system. For instance, again, by aligning the 3 elementary schools, there will be more needs all at once for those vans, and that's the anticipated need. So and when we get into the transportation slide, we've also called that out. And then there's more to talk about as far as that initiative goes, but I wanted to be clear up front. Now, some savings. We've anticipated a turnover savings and built into the budget $125,000. As we've talked in the past, our savings in the salary line for turnover is about $35,000, $36,000 on average per retiree. That's really dependent upon the retiree and the applicant pool. I can say it as a former English teacher, there are always a lot more applicants for an English position than there are for a science position or a world language position or pretty much any other position. So it does depend upon the depth of the pool. And as you know, as a district, we hire the very best person. So we always look to bring in the very best person whenever we have a vacancy, because we recognize that hiring people is our single greatest responsibility and our single greatest opportunity to continue to evolve and move our district forward. So we build in, nonetheless, $125,000 in turnover savings based on some historical perspective. And of course, this is a conversation we have annually with the Board of Finance, and keep an eye on that number. We do not, at this point, as far as I know, have any retirements in hand, but it would be very early to have them now. We're also bringing down our classroom teachers over at Saks in the 7th grade. That's driven by enrollment. Again, the decrease of the 47 students or so that's anticipated there will be responsive to that. It will keep classes within the class size guidelines. However, you'll see it's not a 2.0 because that additional 0.2 is being retained in order to really take a close look at the class sizes for the advanced math classes, as the board's discussed before, and look to see, is there a way that we can use that to bring those class sizes down in order to keep all of them within the class size guidelines. We're still looking to see how that can happen. Okay. Our next item is our employee benefits. The employee benefits themselves, as you know, there's our single largest item in the budget. We've been working very closely with Joe Spurgeon, our insurance consultant, who will be here on the 13th, on Monday the 13th at 6 o'clock, to walk the board through, to answer any questions and have conversation about the modeling that led us to the number that you see before you. As Joe does his work as a former actuary, and I think he's really served us well as our consultant these last few years, he develops multiple models based on the data that he has. We're using a moderate modeling here. It's neither aggressive nor conservative. It maintains our corridor funding, as we've discussed, which is 60% held by the school district, 40% held by the town. It maintains our 120% aggregate stop loss and our $300,000 individual stop loss. So both those reinsurance numbers and levels are kept constant. It also, it's a reduced projection for 2020, 2021, which really is driven by significantly improved performance. Some other things we're doing, though, is we're now, in the last year, we've been making a profit in our food service program. And after some conversation, we've decided that, as you may recall, the district has been paying for the benefits for our food service employees, but best practices is to try to have that program be as self-sufficient as possible. So from those profits, we're looking at moving $200,000 from the food service program into benefits in order to pay for a portion of the health benefits for those employees. So to be clear, it is not from the insurance money. This is from the profits that we're realizing in the program for a variety of reasons. And as you'll recall, Michelle Santelli was here to talk about the program a little while ago. And she left and we were all very hungry. There's also been a reduction in the number of retiree and active participants in our plan, which has helped to bring down the cost a little bit. Our reimbursements in our prescription drugs has increased about $100,000 or so, and that is plan design, I think, and Joe as well, going after some of those. I want to also compliment the board for the negotiations in the benefits in the contracts, as we do that when those cycles come up. And really compliment and thank the faculty and staff who approach the benefits and health insurance in partnership with us. As we do this work, we understand that this is a partnership with the district and its employees. It's a promise that we make in order to meet, and an obligation that we make to them in the contract, and they recognize that by doing this together, we can create a program that is sustainable over the long term for everybody. As of this year, all of our employees are in the high deductible health plan. It was the custodians were the last ones to move over, and they just moved over now. And we have our premium share agreements with each of the groups. Our plan design also includes well visits, which I think is very helpful in encouraging folks to stay healthy. And it's certainly may not be correlated, right? But the wellness initiative that we've done here in the district, which is really focused on the emotional intelligence work, but also there's a group that meets monthly over at central office that's representative of all of our stakeholders, all of our employee groups, and others that are there, Susan Bliss, Dr. Keating. It's run by Darlene now, Gary before. That group has really worked hard by putting on health fairs and by organizing different events, whether it's step counting challenges or yoga or other types of things going on in the buildings, and organizing them and communicating them, inviting people to participate. You know, the wellness initiative that we have, again, it may not necessarily be directly correlated. Well, it may not be causal, but it is correlated. How about that? All right. So we're proud of that work too. So how does the plan itself work? As I mentioned, the premium share agreements are, I think, both competitive if you look outward and fair as we look, inward. Our administrators pay 21% of the premium. Our teachers and custodians pay 20% of the premium, and the other groups are in negotiations now. The plan itself, you see the individual and family deductibles. There's a relatively unique design element to our plan, which is that 90-10 cost share if the deductible's reached. That's, as far as I know, we're the only district in the state that has that dimension of the plan across the board for all employee groups. We believe it helps. The design is in place in order to keep consumerism in the model, so that other plans that don't have this cost share, when the deductible's reached, 100% of all other costs are covered by the plan itself. 90-10 doesn't sound like a lot, but it does, I think, keep that consumerism in the plan. But also, in truth, as we have sort of matured in our understanding of how high deductible healthcare plans work and how HSAs work, I do believe that all of our employees are becoming better consumers of healthcare. I know that I am. Knowing that the money that goes into an HSA can roll and is portable is all incentive to be smart about this. And the other thing we did in negotiations is include the prescription cost in the deductible. There are many plans that have that as a carve-out and have more of a PPO design of, a sort of a $15, $20, $50, what have you, formulary. Ours is built into the deductible. And again, I think it helps to build consumerism and good decisions into the plan itself. As I mentioned, Joe will be here at 6 o'clock to discuss more about the modeling and the specifics around the plan. I will also share that in the budget book itself, there's a very clear, I think, and detailed write-up of the Internal Services Fund and how it all works, and certainly all of the detailed numbers and things are there. So take a look. And I know there's an awful lot in front of you tonight as we go through all of this. So I do encourage you to, as you look through the book and sort of think about things, send questions to Katrina, to me. We'll gather them all together and we'll bring them forward at our next Board of Ed meeting as well. Okay. So other objects, in the budget itself, we have contracted services. They're a little under $2 million as a budget item themselves, and a 0.9% increase of about $16,000. We have professional learning that's aligned with district goals is included in this item. Interns, which is money that's being transferred over. We're the home team for the Turkey Bowl, which means we have to increase our costs for some of the contracted services, but there is an offset in fees because we'll make the gate, so it'll help to pay that off. And then we have the negotiations that we're beginning now will continue into next year most likely, so we're covering for that. We're reclassing a few of the stipends. We've been contracting through a service for, I believe, soccer, and that has been in contracted services. We're going to put it where the other coach stipends are in the stipends account itself. So that's just a move from one account to another. The significant decrease here is the reduction in in-source behavioral analyst needs by hiring in-house, by bringing someone in. Again, that will help us bring down that contracted services line. I mentioned before, 81% or so is covered in our salary and benefits. So there are fewer zeros on these numbers than there are the other numbers because these budgets are smaller in all districts as we work through. So property service is about $4.6 million overall. We're bringing it down by $44,000. There are some additions. We're looking at some software as we continue to develop our use of the LMS. We're looking at some software that will help us with that. We're looking to expand it into SACs. We're also looking at a piece of software that does some onboarding of digital programs, of apps and things, and then allows us to manage those it keeps very specific, detailed user data, so that we could look at the apps, look to see what's being used, when, how often, and really look to build capacity around those that we're using most often and well, and continue to sort of prune off those that we're not using. We've started doing that, well, we've always done that, but we had some pretty significant changes this year by eliminating and reducing some software. Specifically, we found some overlap between some programs that we use and some that we just brought in. For instance, we no longer need to support the Moodle program, the Moodle platform, because now we've gone to Schoology here at the high school. So we can move off of that contract, and that saves us over $10,000. We have had a program that we're using for our digital inventory for all of our devices, but now with our new ticketing system that also includes the inventory, we're able to prune that off. So we're continually looking at sort of what are we doing and how can we continue to prune off those pieces of software and things that we don't need anymore, especially if there's overlap and it can be covered by something that we currently have. There's some savings here for the full year implementation of solar at South all of next year, and then the partial year at East, West, and SACs. So you'll see the electricity coming down a little bit. And then we have to make a move over at West for our heating fuel. That the tank is past its useful life. We are maintaining it well, we're managing it, we're testing it regularly, making sure that it's in good shape. With the approval of the state, we're right now in one extra year. So we are really anticipating doing that this summer. But Dan and his team have been vigilant about checking, pressure testing, and looking at the tank itself. But ultimately, we'll be either going to natural gas or propane over there. We certainly would love to get the natural gas over there, but it's a significant commitment by Eversource. So we're still in conversation with them about all of that. Anyway, that's the property services piece. In our purchase services, it's about a $10 million budget in all. This is where the initiative for the changing of our school start times makes a significant impact. In our closest analysis, looking at our system and what it would take, we're looking at 7 additional buses to align the school schedules for the reasons that we've talked about. We are, regardless, going to need to add a bus given our anticipation of where students are moving into the district. And there is a contractual increase in transportation as well. Over the break, you may have seen some buses driving around town. I don't know if you were around and you saw and wondered, why are they running buses during a holiday break? Doesn't make any sense. Well, if you look closely, those buses were actually, I think, 42 passenger vehicles, where our normal vehicles are almost twice that size. We were piloting some sort of mid-size buses to see if they could meet our needs. So some of the challenges with the bigger buses are the tail swing pulling out of certain roads, or turning around in a cul-de-sac. There are some houses, some properties that we've replaced their stone wall more than once. So we try to avoid doing that. So we came in during the vacation break, had some drivers come in, drove these 42-ish, maybe 46, but about these half-size buses to see if they would work. And turns out, it looks like they will. So we believe that we might be able to capture some efficiency through that. It's kind of an exciting development in all of this. They're available through DATCO, so we're having some conversation with them. But there may be an efficiency with that we can capture either time or resources or both. We'll see. But we're continuing to look at it. But I did want to address the question of why were buses driving around during the holidays. The other thing in here, and a significant driver in this total budget itself in purchase services, is the cost of tuition out of district. Reductions here. We save some money by paying our transportation contract in 2 installments instead of monthly. So that's included in there. And a reduction in the allocation for our deductible for our insurance. Okay. We go on to supplies. A $1.3 million item at the $2,600 decrease. The additions in here, simply in our negotiated contract with the custodians, we negotiated a 4-year agreement. As part of that was some outerwear for them once per contract cycle for when they're expected to go out and plow and shovel and do the things outside. So there's an increase there because that's relatively newly negotiated. And there's some textbook adjustments as well. Reductions, some instructional supplies based on enrollment, library books, some non-consumables. Okay. In equipment, it's a small budget in totality at $231,000, going up about $20,000, which is a 9 or so % increase. But that's really driven by two things: the need for classroom furniture replacements, and larger at about $14,000 or more. It's the replacement of the aged kiln at the high school. I know Alan talked about this a bit at our budget workshop. The kiln has been in since the addition. He had some good news about it. I know we had talked a bit, I think it was with the board, about having to take a wall down and having to move things around and do some significant construction down there to move the kiln out, move it in. Turns out that thanks to some new technology in the last 15 years or so and some other things, we should be able to just dismantle it and then bring the new one in. So it will save us a little bit of money and probably a lot of headache. So that's some good news on that. But the kiln itself needs to be replaced. They're worried about failure down there. And then some of the reduction is just bringing down our allocation for unanticipated equipment needs because we can. Okay. There's another small budget item at $230,000 or so. The biggest driver here is an exciting program called Huddle that Jay in our athletics department is partnering with the All Sports Booster Club to bring in to support our entire athletics program. What Huddle does, we've been using NFHS. Jay, it's okay for me to talk about this, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've been using NFHS for a while, which it's a wonderful system with really advanced artificial intelligence for filming games. You put the device up and the artificial intelligence will follow the action. You don't need an operator manually to be doing anything with it. So it really gives us the opportunity to throw a switch and have something on. The challenge with NFHS has been that there's a paywall. And so if you don't subscribe to it, you couldn't get in to see the videos themselves. What Huddle will do is they'll stream live onto YouTube, so there's no paywall. So people can get in to see it all around the world in real time. They also archive all of the footage. And our coaches have gone through training already in how to use those archives to both coach, to train, and to develop film for our student athletes. As you know, many of our student athletes are interested in playing beyond high school, so they put together highlight reels or other things. And Huddle is one of the ways that we've been using it for quite some time in our football program and a couple of others, but now this has expanded it to all of our programs across the school. It replaces the cameras as well and puts newer cameras in place that use similar AI in order to follow the action. So again, it's a flip the switch, turn it on, and you have it filmed. We're looking in the gym and out on the fields as well. So it's pretty amazing technology. The NFHS has been really impressive, but again, that paywall has been a barrier. So using Huddle to do this, they're a competitor to NFHS, I think it certainly makes an awful lot of sense. And our coaches have already gone through the training and are eager to get going for our kids. Sometimes the best way to learn anything is to see yourself on video and to sort of go through step by step. So our coaches are excited to use it. The total cost is around $30,000, and the All Sports Booster Club is committed to covering half of that cost for us. So it's a $30,000 increase in the budget itself, but then that's offset by $15,000 in the fees line that we'll collect. So that is the overall budget itself, sort of looking at each of the objects. But what I thought I'd do is just break out a couple of items of interest that I know exist. First, the big budget drivers this year are similar to what we've had in years past, with the contractual increases, the GWI and STEP for our largest employee group, which is our teachers, which is about the $1.2 million. The increase for general transportation, it's about a 3.5% increase this year. Yep, that's the $115,000. Out-of-district tuition for students with special needs, teachers' grid progression, the additional bus for our students, and then again, the delta on hiring that South School principal. So those are some of the larger budget drivers that we have in our budget. Our budget initiatives that we have is, certainly the largest cost is the effort around aligning school schedules to optimize learning. That's the total, putting together the staffing and the buses, and I'll again break this out a little bit further in a moment, totals up to $954,521. The high school staffing for the social studies, and then professional learning, both with our training of a school neuropsychologist and professional development for our staff around school schedules, and then the assessment management and other software that we've discussed, and of course the huddle video that we just talked about at the end. I think that certainly the highest interest area here, or the item of most interest, is the school start time initiative. So I would like to take just a brief moment just to calibrate on that, if that's all right, and to share the thinking around it. The scenario that the board's been discussing and that we rolled forward into this budget is the scenario that groups the 3 elementaries in that first tier beginning at 7:45 and ending at 2:15. The second tier is the high school at 8:30 to 3 o'clock, and then with Sachs upper division starting and ending 5 minutes later than that. And then the Sachs lower division 9:15 to 3:45. This scenario aligns the elementary schools in the first tier to increase the morning instructional hours. It's aligned with the research and recommendations from various groups, as you know, as having been looking at this for some time. That 5 minutes at the middle tier does help us for those shared buses. Provides us a little bit of time for buses to drop at the high school and get over to Sachs, and then looks and creates some opportunities for the lower division Sachs students before school. What's more important probably than when the school actually starts is when the kids need to be picked up. And this is a challenge for our district with over 125 miles of roads, most of which are 25 miles an hour. So Rory and his good work has been developing these visuals for us to really understand and be able to go a level deeper into this question. So what this illustrates is the pickup times in this scenario for elementary school students with the 7:45 start. And you'll notice the bus rides themselves are significantly shorter for the elementary students in this regard than they would be, say, for the high school or for the middle school where on the first tier. And that's really due to the fact that we have 3 elementary schools that are distributed around town, so the rides themselves are shorter because we're capturing that efficiency of having the 3 schools that are more neighborhood schools. So the buses can travel out earlier than this. Buses will be on the road by 6:45, 6:30, but the first student would be picked up here at 7:06 is the time. And then the buses move towards the school generally. And again, you capture that efficiency of having those 3 elementary schools. What you'll see here is that it's really around 7:23, 7:24 before you hit about the halfway point to the number of students who are picked up. There's also a short window, the 10-minute window between the arrival time and the bell time for those kids. And that does pose a challenge as you're developing the scenario, as you may recall, in that for high school students, that window can be larger. So you can drop high school students off 20, 25 minutes earlier than the start time if you have to, in order to build in a little bit of time to get out to the furthest reaches of the district to start picking up for that next tier. Because high school students can be in the cafeteria. They don't need the type of supervision that our youngest students do. So in this model, we had to be very tight with that time, and we kept it to a maximum of 10 minutes between the arrival time and the start time of the school. You'll see the second tier rides are longer because now we are picking up high school students and 7th and 8th grade. And so the buses will drop off at the elementary schools and head back out to go get those next kids. And the benefit of having the buses start from the 3 different schools instead of all in one place is captured and does help a little bit, but they still have to get all the way out to our furthest reaches. So in this model, the second tier riders, the earliest pickup would be that around 7:41. And again, you see about the midway point being somewhere around 8 o'clock for pickup for 7 through 12. Okay. And then the drop-off. And again, we're using about a 15-minute window there for drop-off in order to get the buses back out and get to our third tier, which, while it has fewer students, still covers the 125 plus miles of roads. And so the earliest pickup on that third tier, you see, is actually before the first bell of our second tier, because that bus is dropping off and going out. So it's around 8:27, 8:28. And those would be the students who are in the furthest northern reaches of town. And then the buses will pick up and bring those students in. And you see about where the halfway point is there as well. So the timing on it and how it all works, again, this is using our current students. We are not able to factor in kindergarten because we don't know where they're going to come from yet. We're also including all of next year's juniors, and we know that many of them do not opt to take the bus. So we're trying to kind of balance that out a little bit as far as the timing goes. But you don't know what you have until you have it. So with our kindergarten enrollment, we're still, we're modeling as best we can based on what we know. The other important data point to consider and discuss is the drop-off time for our third tier. Right, so the third tier would be our SACS grades 5 and 6. The bell would end, the school day would end for them at 3:45. Of course, the bell doesn't end and the buses roll. You have to wait for the kids to get to the bus, to walk to them and to get going. So the buses would anticipate departing 8 minutes later at 3:53. And again, you see that drop-off time. And those at the furthest reaches at the 4:25 to 4:30 would be generally those students who live in the far northern corner of town. So the costs, when we pull together the costs for this initiative, there are some staffing costs, as we've discussed. The certified staff to account for shared staffing, the non-certified staff. There's a supervisory need for the first tier. As you know, we talked about it a little bit in the budget workshop, and what we're thinking at this point is this is for students, the youngest students who don't have somebody there to greet them when the bus arrives at their home. Right now, those buses then might do an extra loop prior, and then if nobody's still there, would go back to the school and bring the child back to either east, south, or west, where the secretary and the administration would work to connect the child with the parent. As your first tier, that option's no longer available, right? The buses can no longer go back to east or west in order to deliver the child and then get back on time to the next two tiers. So we had to come up with what's a good solution to that problem, because it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. So our current thinking is that we would have somebody available at South, which is still an elementary school. So it would be somewhere that is more accommodating, probably less frightening for our youngest children than, say, coming to the high school or coming to Saks. So the bus could drive through South to drop off the child and then not lose any time and get back on the run. So that $5,400, $5,500 is anticipated cost for teaching assistant coverage in order to help with that. Does that make sense? Okay. And then with the new employees, assuming the average for the cost of the benefits, about $63,000. The other cost that has to be included in this is the 7 additional buses, which is about $733,500. So the total of the school start time, as we've really looked at it since the summer, and tried to evaluate and understand and adjust, is this $954,521. So the efficiencies I've talked about a bit. Certainly that enrollment variability adjustment, the reduction of staff, the turnover savings, the savings in the health benefits, again, is significant and something that we can talk about some, and Joe will be here to talk about more. Reduction in some of the work, the elimination of software has gotten us about $34,000. The installation of solar is a big savings for us. And even the conversion away from oil, whether it's propane or natural gas, will save us close to $10,000. So all of these things do add up. So when we look at the total budget itself, with the change in school start times, the change in the budget year over year is $1,340,809. The total budget request is the $92,775,764. It totals out to a 1.47% year over year budget change. Again, that's including the initiatives and including everything that's in there. The budget without the change in school start times, so it becomes a $386,000 change year over year. It's about a 0.4% increase year over year. Now, we know that the Board of Finance has worked very hard over the last couple of years, and particularly this year, to develop guidance. They've been looking at a variety of different indicators and metrics, and we had our meeting on Saturday about a couple of months back, and we learned more about sort of how that was developed. So ultimately, the Board of Finance's guidance for the Board of Ed has been about 1.5% overall, year-to-year change. And so I've said many times, I'll say it again, we don't budget to a number. We look at the opportunities that exist. We look at what our district needs and build our budget from the ground up based on those needs. But I am glad to say that looking at this 1.5%, we are able to bring in a budget that's just below that, at the 1.47, with the change in start times. And without the change in start times, it would be, it's that 0.4, so about 1.1% below that. Again, I really do believe that it's our uncompromising commitment to excellence, our unrelenting pursuit of efficiency. Excellence is our expectation. Schools exist for our children, the parents, and the community. Every student in our schools deserves a world-class education. And this sustained commitment to excellence in all dimensions has empowered us to deliver the outstanding results for our stakeholders and to bring this budget before you tonight. So that's our operating budget. I believe I probably move into capital next. I'm glad to take a breath, if you like, or a sip of water. If you have, we can talk operating before we move into capital, if you like. Katrina, whatever you prefer.
Let's do
And of
that.
course, I'll look to the A-team here to my right and to my left if there are any really hard questions.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you for that very thorough, excellent presentation. Any questions or, yes, Brendan?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for a great presentation once again. I feel like 4 years ago when I got my first one, maybe it was 5, I can't remember, it was great, but now it just every year seems like it gets better, so thank you. And thank you for being thoughtful around how you presented it, but also the fact that you've I think taken into account the guidance and come in with a number that's below once again for the second year, at least the guidance has been out there. Just overall, is there anything from an academic or other standpoint that you felt like you couldn't get in there, or was was something that is an initiative that you maybe push out to future years that you didn't have in the budget?
We begin the budget process very early, and we've had many of these conversations. I think that the budget you have before you does reflect our best thinking and what the district's needs are. We didn't set out to hit a certain number. We wanted to bring forward a budget that continues to move us forward in the most strategic and important ways, and I do believe this budget does that. There are times that large numbers in budgets can crowd out other initiatives, but given the positive experience in our health benefits and our ability to work with that, this wasn't one of those years. I think that for instance, is the staffing of the high school. That's an important thing that we put forward because our kids need it. But as far as what the district needs in order to continue moving forward, this budget does that for us.
Great. And then just one other question on athletics. So I think we had talked about maybe trying to fund more of hockey, because it's obviously an expensive sport with ice time and everything, but I didn't see that in here. Is that something that we're thinking about for future years, or is it in here?
It is.
Okay.
I didn't call it out, but
Yeah.
it is. We're looking to fund a bit more and try to. I know Jay's goal is always to get to at least a 50-50 ratio, and this budget continues to move in that direction.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
So I echo, it's exciting to see, this budget that is coming in within guidelines and, meeting the needs that you've expressed for the district. I do have a couple questions. The first being, I I guess having been in the budget process a few times, and we've talked about that cafeteria fund, and I know why we're pulling money out of that balance, and, and it makes sense, but I would be careful in how you articulate that, because as I look at the annual profit and loss on that account, $200,000 is not what we're making annually, and I would be afraid that there would be an expectation that that $200,000 to health insurance would be an annual contribution after this year. So I would be careful how we articulate that, because I totally agree with how we're doing that this year, but I don't believe that that's something that we can do going forward based on the profit and loss annually in that fund.
Okay. Do you want?
So based on our performance, revenues to expenditures.
Right.
For the last year and a half.
Right.
It averages a little bit over 250 in that area.
So you're only projecting next year 80.
But if you take a look at the revenue section or the expense section, you can see 200,000 coming out of that number for health insurance.
Oh, you know what, see, this is the problem, all this detail, I can't get into it until I get home, but.
So we felt safe with that right now.
Okay,
However, your
yep, I
point
do
is
see
well
it.
taken.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, we have to
It's-
monitor it.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would
you're right,
worry.
because
I mean,
we-
we do have a good fund balance right now for unexpected reasons, and, but I would be careful on that.
And the bigger point that you're making, which is something that we do talk about and think about, is that sustainability.
Right.
Right. We want to make sure that the systems, the decision we make, the systems we put in place are sustainable over time.
Right, and quite frankly, as a district, I think, the food service, it is a philosophical discussion about what is the food service program for, and that's developed to give lunches at a decent price to our students, and I understand other people might say we want to make a profit and offset some things, and we can talk about it, but we might want to, as a board, talk about what that whole system, what we're doing if we're making a profit that can offset health insurance. So
Sure.
it's just a discussion to have. Can I
just-
finish? Sorry.
Sorry,
No,
I was going to respond.
Oh,
but-
okay.
Yeah, no, just as a suggestion
Yeah.
on that topic is maybe we develop a policy to charge that account,
Yeah.
for benefits going forward, just so that, maybe we have done that, I don't know. But that would be a good way to
Well,
sort
there's-
of deal with it going forward.
There's actually been a philosophical discussion on the opposite side, that
Okay.
it shouldn't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a discussion to have as a board, and I worry that we're setting ourselves up in this budget cycle without having had that conversation as a board, that's what we're going to do. So, I think we should just have a longer discussion about that. And then just a couple questions on the start times. So I know you talked about what's going to happen with the kindergartners at South. What has been the discussion on, those TAs or aides that are on those buses that also can't get back? And what's sort of the, what are we going to do with those teachers? Do we see an increased cost, or how do we get them back to their cars? And I mean, it's just a logistical question.
It is. And I don't think I have a logistical answer for that question at this
Okay.
point. But the question is, there are TAs who ride on the buses with the youngest students. And then generally what happens is the bus drives them back to the school because it's the third tier and they pick up their cars. But now the bus can't get back there. So do they stay on the bus and that goes back past the school and get off? Or is there another way to do that? We have to figure that out.
Okay, and there could be costs associated with that, so we just need to make sure.
It could be a little more time. Mhm.
And then the other question I had was notification of parents. So I understand, I no longer get those notifications, so I don't know what was sent out. But were parents notified of what this new, for the parents' meetings this week and next week for the elementary and high school? Were they notified of the schedule that's being proposed?
Yep, the PTCs and the PFA generously allowed me to swap my time with
Right.
New Canaan Cares. And so tomorrow morning, we'll be going to the PTC meeting to have the conversation, both around budget and around this dimension of the budget, right, for feedback. I do believe that the PTCs did communicate something out. in their newsletters that I would be coming to talk about these things. But I also, after tonight, am intending to send something out tomorrow. Once, unfortunately, it's after the PTC meeting, but to explain kind of the thinking and what the scenario is, share with them some slides around impact, and invite them to participate in the other opportunities that we have for discussion. It's been, the challenge, of course, is that until the budget comes forward before the Board of Ed, I haven't been able to communicate about the specifics and details of that, but now we can. So we have the proposal in front of you.
Okay, well, I guess I'm a little bit concerned about that, because I think at the last meeting, a few of us made it clear that we would like parents to understand what is being proposed, so that, for these meetings, people are prepared to ask questions if they're in support of or if they're against, because I think, as a board, I need to understand what the parent population is feeling about what's being proposed. I think that goes a big part of my decision-making in this, and so
Sure.
I'm a little concerned that parents haven't really gotten a good sense, unless they're very engaged, and there are parents that are very engaged, but there are other parents that won't be as engaged, but if they got something specifically from the school saying, this is what we're looking at, they would become more engaged. So
Well,
I think it's very important that we get a specific, and I think I've articulated this, a specific letter out to parents with what's being proposed in advance of those meetings, so that they know they can come being prepared. I did get a call from a parent this week, so I just wanted it was a question. They didn't even know what was being discussed. And obviously, you need to be more, there are ways to find out, but we need to make it crystal clear to parents what we're looking at.
Sure, and I'll also be reminding them of the public hearing on the 13th, which I think is purposefully designed as an opportunity for the board to hear.
But it is a very tight window, even though we've added these things. It's 2 weeks. We're voting on this in 2 weeks, and, I think it's our job as a board to make it very clear to parents what we're looking at. There's a major change, a major potential change that, unless we articulate it clearly, I don't think it's fair to the to the public. So that's just my own. And then I think that's it for right now. Thank you.
Carl?
Thank you. On the December 9th meeting, we talked about the behavioral analyst and bringing that person on full-time. So there's the cost of that on the FTE basis, and then the offset from the services, contracted services. Where does it net to? Is it kind of a break-even thing, or?
I don't think it's quite a break even. I think that, you may know.
In terms of what the projected cost for the new hire versus the offset, well, it's hard to predict what the new hire salary is going to be. You can ballpark it probably between $70,000 or $80,000 a year in terms of salary, depending on experience. But it's not a direct offset. It's only a portion.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
And just I was intrigued by the half-size buses. That sounds interesting. It sounds like it's kind of early days in exploring that. How much do those buses cost versus a full-size bus? Is there savings, or is it negligible?
It is early in that. I think that the efficiency we'll be able to capture may be in time, in that those buses can get to some of the further reaches that right now we have to send a number of smaller buses out so they can pick up more kids, and it might allow us to make a difference that way. I don't know if it'll have a significant impact on the cost, but we're developing that out now. I mean, it was last week that we figured out that it'll work, but we'll take a look. The drivers are a big part of the cost, so you still have the same number of drivers.
Yeah.
One of the advantages could be, if we go that way, is that I believe we could have propane buses on the road to do that right away. Whereas if not, then we'd probably be a year out to getting propane. So there may be a little bit of savings in the fuel cost in doing that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Sherry?
So, first, do you want another sip of water?
I'm good.
A Netflix break?
Do I need it?
No, so I just also want to echo, kudos on a very tight budget presentation and for coming in under the town guidelines, which is excellent. So I just want to clarify on the inclusion of the school times initiative. And I know that, again, this has been a very long and detailed, thoughtful process. We talked at the last meeting how this has been 2 years in the making. And many different scenarios have been examined, prototypes, and a lot of stakeholder feedback has been gained. And we also know that there's various stakeholder feedback, varying different views on what schedule works best. So I just want to clarify that the schedule that's in here, that as you present this as part of the superintendent's budget, that you're actually recommending this schedule as the best schedule to optimize student learning at all levels. I just want to clarify that this is in fact what the administration believes is best for all of our students.
This is the scenario that the Board of Education has directed us and guided us to include in the budget. We brought it forward to you because we do believe that of all the scenarios that we've looked at, that it has the most positive impact on the most children. Are you asking me if I think we should include it in the budget?
Yes, I guess I'm asking, I need to know if the administration is recommending this schedule as being, I mean, it's listed here, it says this is the schedule that optimizes student learning for these reasons. It aligns the elementary schools in the first tier to increase morning instructional hours. It's aligned with research and recommendations, et cetera. So I just want to be clear that this
Sure.
is in fact
So-
the schedule that's being recommended.
Right. As we've discussed as, you know, as an administrative group, as a board and others, as we look at making a change, right, the districts that have tried to make a small incremental change are right back at the table soon thereafter. The research is strong around the changing school start time as one dimension of a wellness initiative on behalf of all children, right? I've said from the start that the goal isn't to change school start times. That doesn't matter. It's about healthy children and having a school system that promotes the health and wellness of our students. I've been deep in this for a long time. We have some hard constraints here in New Canaan that don't exist in a lot of other towns, right? So given all of the constraints and all of what we have, I do believe that this is the best scenario to put on the table for discussion and consideration and ultimately, you know, to go with or not. I think that it does provide for an improved experience based on research for a majority of our kids, for grades 7 through 12. You know, it's unfortunate that anyone has to be disadvantaged at all, and you could say the 5th and 6th grade might be a tough spot for them in that third tier. But it is the smallest group of kids, you know, as they go through. The reading I've done recently, even around some of the districts that have made changes, they're concerned around the elementary students. That's common, right? In any district that's made a change where the elementaries have started earlier, they've community expressed concerns about the elementary. I do think that our system and the pickup times makes that more palatable. You know, I think that that's an important dimension of this. To just look at the 7:45 and to project out the high school ride times into the elementary, which is I think what we all generally do, comes to a very different pickup time. So I think that the fact nobody's picked up before 7 is an important piece. I would not have brought it before you if I didn't think it was worth consideration. Unless you told me to. And then I'd tell you.
No, that's very helpful, and
Okay.
I want to thank you for your leadership and for the context on that. And this is just a small second point, but as we isolate the costs for this on page 24, so that includes the cost of 7 additional buses, but I've heard you say several times that regardless if we make this change or not, we would have to still add 1 bus. So
It's actually 8.
oh, it's actually 8.
That's an 8th
So
bus.
this is
There's 7 there's an 8th bus that
Got
has
it.
to come in
Okay.
regardless.
So this
based
is
on
purely the isolated cost for the change? Okay.
We tried to really be very specific.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Deanna?
So I'm pleased, and I know Penny will be pleased, that there are so many opportunities for you to meet with staff and to go through this. And I just wanted to understand, one, how you're breaking it out. Are you doing each school with the staff? Is that how you're going to be going through?
One school at a time with
Okay.
each of the schools at the schools.
Okay.
And we've set those up through the principals already, and we begin as early as tomorrow.
And is it all teachers are invited to come and talk about it, or is it a focus group within?
Nope, it's wide open, all staff.
Okay.
Teachers and non-certified as well. All staff are welcome to come in. We'll give an overview and then really open up. It's similar to what we did about a year ago or so. And some great feedback came from that actually has been incorporated into the scenario that you have. The feedback from our elementary teachers about sort of student stamina in the afternoon, there was a real concern about the quality of instructional time after 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon, 2:30, for those youngest students. So that's a piece of the conversation. So we go, we listen, and I've been in communication with Vivian Birdsall as well, certainly as the president of the NCEA. We've been in communication with the presidents of the other employee groups. I've spoken directly with a teacher here at the high school who is the chair of the group that's looking at it from a faculty perspective. So we have taken steps to keep everybody in the loop as much as we can. But we do anticipate that these meetings will be well attended.
Okay, I would imagine. And then the follow-up to that is how, because I see we have the 8 o'clock special meeting the morning after that last meeting with staff.
That's the meeting with PTC.
Oh, is that?
SACS and the high school PTC.
Okay, so maybe
right.
I'm looking at the wrong, here we go.
Yep.
Okay, so.
Yeah, we have a meeting, the Board of Ed workshop scheduled for the morning of January 16th.
Oh, so yeah, you have it all the way
And-
up to the night,
And the last
day before
meeting is with the SACS and the high school PTC PFA, the
Okay.
morning of the 15th.
Right, and, okay, and then we vote on the 21st. So we have a special meeting the morning of the 16th, though. So will we have all that feedback consolidated for that meeting? I mean, how do you envision getting that feedback? Will we have something in writing?
Yeah, I'm going to have somebody come with us to take notes and script, because as you know, when you're engaged in the conversation, you can't do both. So somebody will be there from our office to sort of keep notes and script as we go through. And we'll be putting that together. It may be a little raw, but it'll be complete.
Thank you.
Penny?
So, thank you again for the budget presentation, and I guess I had one small and one larger question. One, I appreciated the detail that you gave on the staff going out and meeting with different colleges, and I just was wondering, I assume that that is in the conferences and travel for the high school line? Is that where that? And I just want to make certain to make certain that the guidance department had kind of done a ground-up analysis to make certain that they thought that they were getting to the schools that they needed to get to on a regular basis. Just, our students are so amazing. They're just unbelievably talented, and they fan out to a large, number of different schools. And so I don't know, I know when we originally put that number in, we sort of did it a little bit, let's use this for a few years and see how it goes. And that was about 10 years ago. And so I'd be interested if the guidance department thinks that they need a little bit more money, or if that's the right amount of money for getting to all the colleges and universities, because the number of schools that our students are going to has expanded since we actually put that number together. So I don't think if we adjusted the budget, I don't think it would be a big adjustment, but I'd be interested in knowing on that score.
Sure, and I know that in building the high school's budget, Bill Egan did speak with all the program leaders and department chairs, but I'd be glad to circle back to the guidance department themselves and just ask that very specific question about those resources and how that's going. I'd be glad to.
Great, just because we can't, we just need to keep selling our students. They're fabulous.
Absolutely.
And then on the biggest issue on the table, which is really the school start time issue and the initiative, I guess, have we done any analysis to find out how many teachers we think are going to be negatively impacted by it? And how seriously, I mean, in terms of commuting issues and where they live and what the situation is and something like that.
So we haven't done much analysis on that because I'm anticipating that they have. So I think that as we go into our meetings with faculty, that'll be part of our conversation. The change makes people nervous, and there are concerns about it. One of the things Dr. Crenti and I have talked about is really going to those meetings with a clear understanding of even our transfer language, our voluntary transfer language in our contracts. We may have some folks that it works better to be in a later tier, some that maybe works better to be in an earlier tier, and there may be some requests for some transfers for people, in the district to different grade levels. If that's the case, then we want to know how to facilitate that for them to make this work. Our teachers are professionals. They love what they do, and they do it in, I think, the best district on the planet. So, with that as their basis, there may be some that it is impossible given the dynamics of where they live or their family dynamics and others. And I do hope to learn that. So that's information I'll look to gather prior to the meeting on the 16th, so that we have a clear understanding. I hope that our teachers do know and understand that we don't take that lightly at all. We know the quality of a school district is directly dependent upon the quality of our instructional and teaching staff. I will share, when I spoke with the person facilitating the group at the high school, his piece of feedback was that they may or may not like the result of what's going on, but they do recognize and value and honor the fact that the Board of Ed has taken its time to truly deliberate and understand the question and the issue, that they see some districts sort of jumping to making the change before they actually understand what that change is or how they're going to do it. And I think that, well, he shared with me directly that the teachers that are watching do recognize and are grateful that the board and district has taken its time to really understand it and to try different scenarios, look at things, see what's going to work prior to making whatever the decision's going to be. So that was encouraging feedback from the teacher.
That's good. So the other question I had on the school start times related to the activities. I feel like we have a really good analysis in terms of athletics and how that would work under the new proposed schedule. I wasn't, and I think that Bill Egan has probably actually thought long and hard about how this is going to happen, but I just hadn't heard how do we think we're going to manage all the different clubs and activities that the students do now so that we still have that vibrant, full experience for each student.
With change, there's also some opportunity. So for instance, I hope I don't let the cat out of the bag here, but I know that Alan is talking about, he's always wanted to have a 5th and 6th grade orchestra. And maybe there's an opportunity for a 0 period prior to the 5th grade, 6th grade starting to do something like that, to have some opportunity. There may be other opportunities for clubs and activities at SACs and even at the high school that are not every day, but maybe sporadic, that could occur before school or after school, depending upon, students and their schedules or what have you. I think that that's something that we have the system that we have around the school day, the ecosystem, because of the anchor of the school day in the middle. So as the anchor shifts, I think the ecosystem will respond as well. I do think that the end of the school day will be more challenging for our 7 through 12 staff. Certainly for the high school staff, and we do have, some people that drive a very long way to get here. So I would anticipate that in general, they may stay with the same kind of time schedule, but be here earlier than the school day begins instead of staying, in the afternoon. Bill may be moving his faculty meetings to the morning, to facilitate that instead of the afternoon. There are other types of meetings and PLC meetings, department meetings and others that may move to the morning for the faculty that would, again, facilitate that. And so I think that that's all something we have to just look at and kind of support and develop and grow as it comes on, if we were to go that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Deanna, go ahead.
So just as a follow-on to that, because I think I think my concern, and I think it needs to be really fleshed out before we make a decision, is the before-school movement to activities. I think we need to be talking to our dual-income families. It's not going to impact the juniors and the seniors. They can get themselves to school before school. They can get to their activities. It is going to impact K through 10, at least. And 11, my kids were late. They couldn't drive. But I was home, and I could get them there. Not every family in this community can do that. And I think we need to be sensitive to, those are the things that make this district what it is. Districts that don't have this vast array of extracurricular opportunities for its students, I think it shows up in the social emotional things that they're not, so I think, we could be taking one step forward and two steps back by sort of precluding probably the percentage of the population that probably needs those activities the most. And so I think we need to be very careful as a board. I thought when we started this process that we were very clear we were going to protect that before school time if we were going to engage in this. And I'm a little concerned to hear that before school time is no longer being protected. And so I think we need to be really thoughtful in this process. And I think parents need to be aware of these things because there's a lot of things we haven't flushed out as a board. And these things are really critical to the overall environment of the district.
Brendan?
Yeah, just a comment on that and then maybe a question too. I don't think we're talking about, obviously every single day of the week, forcing kids to be there for activities or other things. I think what we're talking about is making sure that, kids have longer times to sleep and are able to go to school later. And if they opt to or need to, go for extra help, it seems like, most high school teachers will probably show up at 7:30 or maybe earlier than that and be available for help. But that's not something that a kid has to do every day necessarily, or, go to their club every single day. It's not likely to be every single day. And if it is, then that child can choose to go, wake up early and go participate in that activity. So I think we are making it easier for kids to, make that choice and families to make that choice as to whether they, want to take that time for extracurricular activities or take that time to sleep. Just a question on the budget. On purchase services in the reforecast, can you just talk to us about the increase? It's about 450 grand or so, 470 grand. From the, in purchase services, from the budget to the reforecast, the projected, it's on page 21, sorry.
So from the special ed perspective, some of that is allocating funds that were previously in sped services or related
Okay.
services,
Yep.
being shifted over into a different account.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, so what has happened in the past is when we have a student outplaced, we receive a tuition bill, and then some students also receive related services. And those services had previously been charged to a purchase service account. Whoops, sorry. Okay. To a purchase services account. And so we reclassed them to tuition out of district because that's how we have to report it out.
Right, okay.
And we're going to, I
Thank
think,
you.
even rename that line.
Right.
Instead, because tuition out of district becomes a little bit of a misnomer, so it'll be out of district.
Out of district.
Right, or outplaced.
Place.
Outplaced.
Outplaced.
Okay.
Because it's more than the tuition in that line.
Okay, thank you.
Carl?
I wanted to talk, or had a question about the reduction in the healthcare benefit, and specifically the full $2 million savings is in the internal services fund. So first, huge commendation for moving to that structure. I actually also am a participant in a high deductible plan with an HSA, and it definitely introduces that consumer dynamic, which we make for all of our other spending choices, but for some reason we don't make for healthcare unless you are in a structure like this. So it's a great move. It's a substantial reduction. It's a 16% reduction from last year. Is it sustainable at that level? I mean, obviously there is some volatility, variability to that number, looking, just at the numbers from the last 3 years. But I'm just trying to think of from a budgeting perspective. It's important to have a view on that because the headline number in terms of the total increase is wonderful, including that it's able to accommodate the increased costs with change start times if we decide to do that. But the question is, does that end up being a mirage because the $2 million is just kind of a one-time release this year. And then next year, we could be looking at actually a $2 million increase, which would be, huge the other way. So it should be important to have some perspective on that.
And I'll give some. Joe will be here to give quite a bit more, and certainly Dr. Keating's welcome to jump in. But that's exactly the question that we've been sort of talking to Joe about, right? Because again, it's not about a flash in the pan. It's not a one-time savings. We're building sustainable systems over time. So in the negotiations and in the plan design that the board and district has accomplished over time, we believe at least a significant part of that is somewhat of a resetting of the base. And Joe, again, will speak more specifically. This is what he does. But the budget itself is built using a moderate projection, right? Certainly, it's not aggressive. And it really does conform to the same budget modeling principles that we've used over time. So we are fully funding the corridor. Our projected claims are simply based on our past history. We've had some pretty tough months roll off, and we've simultaneously had some pretty good months roll on. And I think that in part, again, as people become familiar with how the plans work, it's a significant shift from a PPO. And traditionally, teachers and folks in school districts had PPOs as their insurance plan. So now as we continue to sort of evolve and mature in our use of it, I think that we're getting better at it. But the budgeting principles behind the numbers are the same that we've used over time. So we did not sort of pull any different levers here. It fully, like I said, fully funds that 60% corridor with the town funding the 40%. I don't know, Dr. Keating, if there's anything to add other than, just some fortuitous.
No, I think that the key point here is that we have budgeted to the funding plan from the town at the 60% of the corridor for the last 5 years that I've been involved. What's happened over the last few years is that we have anticipated using some of that fund balance to offset the next year's budget. So, for example, this current year, we anticipated using $811,000 in fund balance to zero it out to that 60% corridor number. We didn't need that. In fact, we expect to come in at a surplus of $300,000+. So this current year, we plan to pick up $1.1 million. And it's really solely related to a couple of things. Primarily, the claims have been consistently down for the last 24 months. Mm-hmm. And we also have gained a couple $100,000 in stop-loss insurance bidding with the town. So that's been there. And another $100,000 in the RX rebates. So those are the things that have been consistently helping our budget out. So it's really a combination of a few different variables that come up with the $2 million. But regardless, we would not be budgeting beyond that because of the fact that we don't budget beyond the town policy. That's our agreement with the town.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other? I had two questions. Schoology, I see that it's in the budget. It's expanding at Saks. And I'm just trying to recall from the budget workshop. So the elementary schools right now have access to it in terms of pilot, but in terms of budget would go into next year, 22?
So the teachers have access to it. So the students do not have access to it, nor do the students at Saks have access to it. So the way that Schoology works is you pay per student. So we would look to probably increase the student enrollment in Schoology at Saks for next year. One of the big pieces, if you remember at the budget workshop, was what we also talked about, that digication, and that the digication is fading away in how they're utilizing it at the middle school because it's just no longer appropriate. It's just not the right kind of software for our 5th through 8th graders to be putting their work. It's more web-based and it's more about web design versus actually using it as a portfolio. So Schoology has that piece where the kids would be able to put their artwork and or their pieces that they use for digication right into Schoology. So that would be that cost savings that would take place there. And then right now it's a way for us to start putting into the curriculum so that it's all in one place, so teachers could access the health curriculum at 3rd grade, or teachers could access the social studies curriculum for 8th grade, and it would just house it all in one place. But when we move over to Schoology, it would probably be by grade level. So we have to kind of think through that piece, because it would probably be best if you kind of work through like a cohort. So do you start with 8th grade knowing that they're going to go into the high school, or do you start more with 5th grade and you follow them up? So that's kind of more the discussion that we'll have to have.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. And then my other question is on the buses. Do we anticipate, just with the bus contract negotiation coming up and the increase in buses, are there any trends that suggest that we'll see a great increase, potential savings from, I don't know, anything we're learning from other districts who've had recent increases?
It's not.
There we go. When the contract came up a few years ago, we decided not to go out to bid, but rather negotiate, because all the renewals were coming in the upper 8, 9, 10% range. And we were coming in at 3 and 3.5 and 3 3.25. So we have 2 years left to our contract, and we'll find out after that. We'll do some more research at that time.
Yeah, okay. All right.
We're halfway done.
You ready?
Capital always goes a bit quicker. All right. So there are two components to a Board of Education's budget. There are actually more than two, but two primary. One is certainly the operating budget. That's the money it takes to operate our school district each year. We also have capital budgets, which are the investments that are made to protect or to enhance or to acquire resources. Where the operating budget is managed regularly, daily by the Board of Education, the capital budgets, that funding remains with the town, and then as it's approved and expended, then it's the town that expends the money, as you know. So we'll briefly go through the three areas of capital here, and then glad to answer any questions, and certainly Dan is here as well, and Joanne as well. So we'll start with our facilities capital. We have a 5-year facilities plan. It's in the budget binder. Didn't want to go into all of that detail visually here, but we do continuously update our 5-year plan. Some things get deferred, some things get accelerated, some things are added, and you'll see the column where it says planned, accelerated, or new. You're not going to see any that are deferred, because then they wouldn't be in the column, right? They get pushed out. So these are the ones that are generally that are here. Although actually you will see some that are deferred, and then maybe this is the year that they were deferred to. For instance, the masonry restoration. So as at the district level, those are funds that we use in order to plan, right? We use the district funds, for instance, to hire the engineer and the planning services in order to do all the work that has to do before we go out to bid on the west roof. So we do that a year in advance at the district level in order to be prepared for when the bid goes out, so that we can look to replicate the experience like we just had this summer at South, which was an amazingly tight and well-run program and project. When we get over to East, we continue to have our painting at each of the different buildings. Again, 1 million or so square feet, a little under 1 million square feet. So an investment in painting helps us to maintain the atmosphere for our kids. Big things here, the parking lot renovation. Now, generally, the parking lots, we begin the process, and you'll see these in a couple of areas. We begin the process with these in our capital budgets, and as the process goes through, it gets shifted over to the Public Works budget, because they'll loop us in when they're doing other paving in different spots, and there are efficiencies there that we're able to grab by working in partnership with them. Biggest thing here, and the biggest single item this year in our capital budget, is the east roof. About 4 years ago, we were asked to defer all of the roofs. We did. Now we spend a sizable amount of money each year repairing the leaks and doing other things that we have to do to keep things going. So certainly it's time for the east roof this summer. We are looking to go out to bid relatively soon on that, because we have to be lined up to begin the day that school ends this summer, so that we're ready to open on time when kids come back. The way that our fiscal year works, it's a July 1 to June 30th fiscal year. So this work will be done in July and August, so it's in next fiscal year. But we have to set it up now. We can't wait, and then nobody would be available to actually do the work. Moving on, again, I'm just hitting a couple of highlights. Glad to talk in specifics about anything here. Over at South, we're looking to resurface the kindergarten playground and sidewalks, but otherwise, the school's in really good shape. As you know, the window project, now the roofing project, other things we've been doing over there, and the solar that's on the roof there. Over at West, there's a couple of items here. Certainly, the parking lot is a big one with $300,000. Again, same thing there with Public Works. West chiller needs to be replaced, and so we're looking at a $290,000 item there to replace the chiller over at West. It is time, for that. Just like at home, these mechanicals reach the end of their useful life, and we have to go ahead and replace them. There's a new item in here called cogeneration. What cogeneration does, I talked about on the slide before, essentially it burns natural gas to generate electricity that brings down your costs. That plus solar and others become a portfolio of kind of energy generation and consumption. They're expensive to put in place, though. So over at Saks, we're looking at it, and it's about $900,000 is the estimate that we were given. Excuse me. The interesting piece with Saks is the boilers at Saks need to be replaced. They've been kind of giving us challenges as well. So if we do the cogeneration over the summer, then, or into the relatively soon, we avoid the need to replace the boilers and put in place something that becomes a long-term cost saving for the district. And that's because of the heat that's generated from the cogeneration, and you're able to capture that and use it in place of the boilers. Okay. But it's a large number, but it has a payback. And we're still looking at working with our engineering group to find out exactly what the time horizon is on the payback and all those pieces, which I know you'll want to know. At the high school, there's, again, the cogeneration plant, which is the $1.2 million. We decided to accelerate the refurbishment of the planetarium. As you'll recall, last year we had somebody come out. They showed us the new projector and what it's capable of, and they gave us an estimate. Now, the $550 that's in the budget is not all of what it will take to refurbish the planetarium. That's a good starting point. It's probably a little more than half. But my anticipation would be that we would reach out to the community, reach out to some other partners, and look to do some fundraising to cover the other half. I think this is a great opportunity for a partnership, a public-private partnership, to do some fundraising and to really make that planetarium turn it back into the spectacular space it can be. The projector we have there, I believe, was installed in 1970. So there are only one or two people around who know how to repair it and to maintain it, and I think it may be time for an upgrade. So the new technology really transforms the space from a planetarium, which is cool, but into a truly multidisciplinary opportunity for students and for staff. Because right now that planetarium, it's 1970 era, so it's not digital, right? There's lots of dials and wires, and it's very manual, and there's only a handful of people in the district who know how to work it. And one of them retired last year. Do you remember who that was? Joanne Rocco. Right. So I'm excited about the planetarium. We can talk more about it, but I think that if the district and the town, I think, commits to a certain funding level, and we can work with the PTCs, the PFA, and others to supplement that and get to what the cost is going to be, I think it could really be a truly spectacular initiative for us. And you should know I've spoken with the PTCs and the PFA, and they are equally, well, not equally, but very excited about this as well. Okay. Let's see. And so our facilities capital, again, you see it at each of the 5 areas. It's the 5 buildings in district. Overall, well, I'll get to the overall total in a moment. There's some costs in here that would likely be moved out again, there's paving and others, but still, things that need to be done. In special education, transportation, we've in-housed the transportation. Years ago, we used to lease our vehicles. We moved away from lease to purchase at the bequest of the town. So we are on a cycle where we look at 7 years, generally, as the age out of the vehicles that we have. These things are driven regularly, lots of miles, lots of wear and tear. So it seems to be the right cycle to be on. So we'll be looking at purchasing 3. One of them would be a wheelchair accessible van. So that's the $15,000 more for the 65 versus the other 50s. We purchase the vehicle. We look where we can to trade in existing vehicles, which helps us a little bit with the cost. And then we also have to run them through all of the testing and the retrofitting, what have you, to make them appropriate to carry children, every day. So the cost on this would be the $165,000. And then we purchase our, that should say, instead of in-house special ed transportation, that should say technology services, because this is our technology lease. So years ago, we reached an agreement with the town around the costs of maintaining and, where appropriate, upgrading our equipment across the district. We finance the money for this, and we purchase the equipment. That confuses a lot of people. They think that we lease the equipment. We don't. We purchase the equipment, finance the money. We finance $600,000 per year at the cost of a little over $150,000. It's $150,000 for each year, and then the upcharge on the finance rate, which is relatively low, as I understand it. So for this year, the budget would be $621,000. We'd be, again, financing $150,000 over a 4-year lease. So these things just cycle out over the course of 4 years. The $600,000 continues to be the appropriate amount for us to maintain the over 5,000 devices that we have across the district, plus the networking, plus the cybersecurity work that we do in our hardware and our appliances, and the other technology work that goes on across the district. One of the initiatives underway is looking at our smart boards across the district. As you know, years ago, the PTCs, PFA generously purchased smart boards for all of our classrooms, but that was long enough ago now that they're starting to age out and fail on us. And so we're looking at, do we replace them with smart boards? Do we look at other types of technologies in those spaces? And we've found some technology that's pretty exciting and that adds some more functionality to the screens and to the classroom. But that's a major undertaking for us. That's going to take years. So that's the type of thing that this finance money, the $600,000, goes to each year. Told you to be quicker. So in total, the capital budget proposal is the $8.3 million for facilities. Again, that includes over $2 million for the east roof, $2+ million for the cogen at Saks and the high school. The east roof, again, I would argue is a must-do, certainly. The cogen is a strongly support in that it's a long-term investment for our district, right? It would mean that over time we would be saving money by doing this work. It also is something that Eversource is very interested in, because they see it that we would be burning more natural gas as a result, and they see that as more incentive to perhaps build the line in over to West and to do that installation so that we could burn natural gas at West and to make it available for the houses along that road. So they're simply looking at that question of what's the consumption, and to determine if the consumption warrants further investment. So that's the cogen would make that more attractive for them. And there you have it.
Questions? Julie?
I had a question on the East School. Let's get to that. The remediate water incursion, is that out in the fields? What, or does that relate to?
Sure. That relates to drainage off of the roof of the building. So we've been looking at, and Dan can certainly fill in and whatever, but we've been looking at the sort of the pathway of the water. So where does it go from the roof down the spouts and out? And I think that the playground is a part of that.
Right. The playground portion has been completed. We would be attaching or looking at the existing drainage systems in the building and outside the building and evaluate their effectiveness and then perform the improvements as needed.
Okay, thank you. So just because my kids went to East, I do remember drainage issues just in general out in the, in the far reaches of whatever. Does that get wrapped into the capital budget, or is that somewhere else, or where's that taken into account? And is that
Depends
something
on how
that's
far afield you're going, I think.
I don't know if it's still an issue or not, but I do remember that was something that was there, and I didn't know if that was, had been taken care of, or is.
Sure, so
something we still look
that type
at?
of work and the work on the playgrounds and other things, we always look to partner with Public Works and with the town. So sometimes, for instance, we replace a playground, they may, or add to, they could use their equipment to help to do some of the grading or some of the removal of equipment, things like that. So, there's a point where the school stops and the town picks up, but that is pretty fluid. We do work closely with them. The east is a little tricky because of where it's situated, and the moisture around, outside when you get beyond the building and what have you. So as we replace the roof, we want to be sure that we can sort of channel and manage all of the drainage that comes around that and be sure it sheds far enough away from the building. So that's a piece of it.
Okay, great. And then just one other thing sort of related to sort of the outside look is, and I'm just not familiar, is where does the upkeep of the buildings, like, I'm just thinking of the high school, all the work that the PFA did in terms of the beautification, like, how does that fall into, I'm sure there's some town partnership too, but where does that get, worked in? Is that
It's a
kinda
great
tricky?
question. And you're right. I mean, the investments over at East, over at the high school, over at South, all of our buildings has been significant, substantial. The initial investment is wonderful. The ongoing maintenance can be a challenge. So we build some of that in. We do talk with the town as well. Back when we began here at the high school, the first selectman then had committed to putting more resources into the budget for that kind of work, for the maintenance on that. And we have a good agreement, I believe. It's certainly a successful agreement with the town. So on the number of times that they will come to the island at the high school and do that kind of work. Typically, the mowing of the courtyards and maintenance of these things does fall on the town. Just it's been our agreement and how we've done things. We do try to help out where we can.
Okay, thank you.
Sherry?
I just have a question on the technology, just in this new age of technology integration in the classroom. Do we have funding or laptops available for students who don't have access to laptops at home? I mean, because starting in the early grades at Saks, they have, as a parent watching my 7th grader, how much homework he's doing online at night. And if for a student who doesn't have access to technology at home, are there laptops available for them to use? And the same at the high school with the BYOB, do we have laptops available for students to use?
We do at the high school it's because of the BYOD, because there's an expectation that they're going to have. There's an expectation. With the BYOD program at the high school.
College student is home.
There's an expectation that they'll have them. So we do have the devices available for them. As far as the middle grades go, I don't believe that we've done that at this point. I can be corrected if I'm wrong. No. It's certainly something we can discuss and talk about. There's a lot that goes with that, certainly around supervision and sort of filtering and other pieces that can make that a challenge. But if there are people that have a need, I would certainly encourage them to come forward and let us know, and we'll problem solve with them. But it's something we can talk about more. Yeah, we do at the high school because we expect it.
Right.
And if students have a need, they go into the library and they have access there and they can check it out and use it through that. Plus, we have students who check them out for the year and do that through the high school if they don't have a device and need one.
Right. I would just encourage us to look at that, because, we obviously have students in need,
Yeah.
but it's one of those things where it's not clear how to come forward. And then
Yep. That's a good
the
idea.
other thing, I love the idea of a sponsorship for the planetarium. And I know that, we have such an amazing network of companies within our parent community. And I know there are several magnet schools in Fairfield County who have technology sponsorships. And they can provide not only the funding for the planetarium, but actually like access to a technology network that I think would be very exciting for our students at the high school level. So I love that idea, and I definitely encourage us to pursue that.
Brendan?
So I like the idea of cogeneration, especially when I see next to boiler replacement expected life of less than 3 years. But when I see it next year for South, for the boiler, is cogen a possibility there at South?
So it's not. And it's really about the power demands, right? Because the
Yeah.
solar's covering most already, and the demands are such that it
Right,
doesn't
it's not
provide
necessary.
you a payback.
Yeah. So we just have to live with 3-year boilers?
Well, there are different types of boilers, right? Condensing boilers, which are different than your traditional boilers that are much smaller footprint. So there's new technology out there for the
Okay.
boilers themselves that really moves away from the traditional boiler, uses the natural gas, and is condensing boilers, I believe they're called now. That's the limit of my understanding. But I have experts here behind me.
No, they're
How'd I do?
great longevity to it.
Okay.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Benny?
So I'm really excited about the possibility of cogen. I was just wondering if any other districts in Connecticut have already done it, or in Westchester, and how successful it's been there, or would we be a leader in this area?
No, there are a few districts that do have cogen in the area. Guilford has had it for years. So there's different types. There's 6 or 7 different types of cogen systems that we're looking at. But we would probably be one of a handful. I don't think it's a common thing out there right now.
So we're not alone, but we're still leaders.
Yes.
And I also wanted to say, I was really excited to see the planetarium in the budget, because that is definitely an aging facility, and if we can do some sort of a partnership, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, good.
Deanna?
So first I wanted to thank Dan and Joanne, because I know that this 5-year capital plan that we get every year is a big effort, and I want to shout out to everyone that we do a 5-year capital plan every year, and it moves along, and there might be slight adjustments, but I think it's important that we reiterate that we do this every year in our budget cycle. I just wanted to, on the Saks cogen, there's that boiler replacement for 463-125 that's not in there. If we don't get the cogen at Saks approved, would we have to, would the 463 in this year go into the capital plan?
It was originally
Okay,
scheduled for next year, the 2021.
okay. So, yeah, so it's just
Yeah.
a net of the.
It literally was today that we were working with our engineers, and they made the
Okay.
connection and said that, with the cogen, they can come out.
Okay.
But it does need to be replaced.
Okay. All right, well, so that's good. I think we should, obviously highlight that. I also want to reiterate what everyone else has said about the planetarium. And, maybe we, we've all been to these meetings where everybody's really looking at every penny in the town. And, maybe there's some opportunities on the operating side, if it's approved, that maybe, we can take income in to offset the operating budget down the line with special events and things like that. And so, maybe in advance of going to the town bodies, we have many really good finance people on this board, and they could work with Joanne and you, and maybe we can think about a way to, pitch that so that there's a better possibility of getting that in this year's budget. So, I think it's a phenomenal opportunity, not only for the students, but for the town as a whole. And so I would like to see anything we can do to encourage the town to say yes. And then I just had a question on the parking lot at East, the acceleration of that expenditure. Did something happen, or just, bad, I don't know, last year wasn't a bad winter, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of it is some of the work that's been done recently, including.
Oh, the roof.
Removal of the oil tank.
Yes.
So there's some patching that needs to be done there. Also to try to coordinate with the town as well, because if it's an opportunity to bundle these projects together, it might mean it's a better idea to do it. Especially also because this summer we plan to have the East School closed to be able to do the roof work, so it might make sense to try to put all these together.
Okay.
So a lot of different reasons why we're thinking about that.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Great.
Carl?
Just a quick question on the cogen. You made the point where it's south because there's the solar on the roof, the cogen doesn't make sense because you're already using you have the energy needs. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there the idea of putting solar on Saks or the high school?
Sure.
And so you run into the same issue where you're going to have an abundance of power production.
No, it's the total load, right? So the amount of power that South needs or the elementary needs is significantly less than Sacs or the high school. So really, that's what our engineers do for us. They take a look and they talk about sort of what the distributed system would look like. So how much, and that's how we would determine the size of the cogen and what the needs are. How much it would burn and what it would produce would be in part based on what the solar would produce. And so all of this is being put together for us in that way. It's simply, the solar is able to generate over 70% of the power needs over at Sacs, over at South.
At South, yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to hit those kinds of numbers in solar for Sacs or the high school.
Yeah, go ahead,
So
Ben.
on the cogen, it's a separate plant, right?
Yes.
And is there an idea about where that would be placed at Saks or placed at the high school, or is that something that's still under discussion with the engineers?
It's still under discussion. Part of it is, it hinges on the system that is selected, right? A while back, there was conversation about a fuel cell, for instance, and we've moved away from that because it would over-generate power. These cogen systems can be almost modular, where you have a couple in place that run like little turbines. Some are in buildings, some are outside of buildings, different places. So all of that would be part of our discussion and
Okay.
presentation.
Just to follow up, what's the noise factor of a cogen facility like that? Are they extremely quiet?
That's what I'm told.
I mean, there's different types, like I mentioned before. However, apparently the decibel noise has gone down significantly in the last 10 or 15 years.
Sure.
Something to be careful about,
Oh, yeah.
because obviously it's at a school. And your neighbors.
Right. Right. Well, and one of the advantages of this is that it can, they're variable speed, so they can also respond to load demands, right? Versus something like solar is just always going to produce, or a fuel cell is always going to produce. But the way these work, they can vary the amount of power that they generate based on the needs of what they're taking care of. So it's not that it would be necessarily running at 1 in the morning and making any kind of noise. It would be when things are occupied generally. But it's all to be determined. See, you learn so much.
Go ahead, Penny.
I was interested in just an explanation on what the auditorium lighting system for the high school was. I know it needs to be upgraded, but I was wondering what it was going to encompass.
And Alan was unable to join us tonight, so I'm going to let him sort of get into the details on that next time we meet, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
Because he certainly knows it.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, so.
Well done.
I just have a question on some
Oh,
of the
okay.
meetings, just, it wasn't on these other pieces, but as we digest this, I'm going through, looking at my email, we had emails about 2 school start meetings that went out in
Yep.
December, right? But on here, it's the same date and times, but they're not school start. So I'm trying to understand what the relationship between these and this, and when we'll get to review, digest this, and then come back with questions and.
I think their budget meetings, but it's
Okay.
an opportunity to further dive into school start times, ask questions, and
Okay.
the monetary side of that, budget or related questions. But
So it's on like.
Same meeting.
Same thing, okay.
Yeah.
And then the resource meeting, you told me the 17th, it's the 16th, right?
I'd have to look. I can
Yeah.
get back to you on that, though.
Okay. I'm just wondering, is the resource meeting a separate meeting, or is that this budget workshop?
Oh, so we haven't talked about it. One thought would be that the budget workshop would replace the resource meeting,
Got it,
because the
okay.
purpose of the resource
Yeah.
meeting is to have that conversation. So I would think one would replace the other.
I think so,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Standing still for a long time.
Yeah, you have.
Okay. He doesn't need his life.
All right. So do we have a motion to approve as a first read the superintendent's budget? Brendan, second? Sherry? Okay, thank you. Any comments from the public?
We didn't
I'm
vote.
sorry. You can close that and move it out of your way, I'm sorry. Oh, so,
Just have moved to first read.
My name is Jennifer DeLipi. I've seen you all before. Dr. Luzier, we traded emails earlier today on the school times. Thank you. We heard tonight that the goal is our healthy children regardless of constraints, but yet the plans we talked about tonight really give the advantage to our 7th through 12th graders. Now, I have a 2nd grader and a 5th grader, so very soon I will be in these later timeframes, but I am really looking at it for all of our children, as we've voiced before. And if we go ahead with the plan that doesn't seem we're all really set on, nor does it feel from tonight that we've dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's on the complication of what's put before us, that we've failed our children across all of our age groups. Our youngest will take the burden of those that are older that should be able to make really smart decisions about how to go to bed, what the loads that they can carry and should manage, potentially see an uptick in sicknesses in our youngest children, tardies, and a decline in enthusiasm. And I can tell you, and I'm sorry, Mr. Grasso left, my daughter Margot went back to school so enthusiastic she had a list of 5 things to give to him on how to improve South School. Well rehearsed at home as well. We've heard from many time and again on all the published research across all of age groups of our children that really 12 hours of sleep between 10 and 12 is necessary. A start time before 8 o'clock, we've heard many times, just does not allow our children of any age to get that sleep time, extracurriculars, working families, and so here we are depriving them of that. We've heard of issues with staff. We have extraordinary staff. My son, no credit to me, wants to go into science because he can look at trout eggs that are about to be birthed in Miss Veach's class. I think it's very cool. We've heard that, quite frankly, some folks think that this is a ridiculous discussion, that younger children just get up earlier. They don't. It's ludicrous. My daughter gets 12 hours of sleep, and I have to yank her out of bed. And we're at South, so we're there at 8:15, and it works. 8:15 is good. Our middle schoolers will lose the opportunity to try new things and be well-rounded with the offerings of after-school programs that are free to participate. And before school, we'll need extra burdens and also a burden on our families. And what have we taught our high school students? They have to get up and they have to go to college and they have to figure out how to show up to a 7:30 lab class or whatever it is. I'm out of time, but we will have failed our dual working families. We've had, go into detail of what we've said before. We have solutions. God forbid there's a kid on the wrong bus and shows up at an awkward place. That's just horrible. And on the PTC, Dr. Luzier and I shared this earlier, there really wasn't notification. There was an email that came out today that there'd be a meeting tomorrow, which is extremely unfriendly for any working parent. And the schedule that was shared tonight is nowhere, maybe on the website, but none of us know about it. So quite frankly, I don't think there has been enough detail that has been shared. And I can tell you, Ben Skrlunis, God bless him for coming tonight, I thought it was hard. There's a lot of discussion about this, not just at the parent level. He was at my house on Christmas and he brought it up. And I encouraged him to come. So thank you, and I really think to keep reconsidering and make sure we have a right decision, maybe not a perfect one, but the best one.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, announcements and future business. Dr. Lutzy?
I'll keep it brief. We have a scheduled public hearing, as we've discussed, on the 13th, here at 7 o'clock. Then the Board of Education workshop on the morning of the 16th at 8 o'clock, and then our next board meeting on January 21st. Additionally, again, those PTC, PFA meetings, there's one tomorrow morning at 9:30 over at East. All are certainly welcome to attend. And then for the SACS PTC and high school PFA, it is the morning of the 15th at the same time here in the Wagner Room at 9:30. And we'll be prepared to run through the budget and to talk about certainly the school start times, because that is the most, it's the largest item in our budget, largest initiative in the budget, and hope people can attend. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. All right, motion to adjourn. Brendan, second. Penny? All right. All in favor? All right, thank you.
Great. Thank